Hi, everybody. Welcome back. It's Word Balloon live. It's Scene Missing. John Suntress here. I am happy to welcome back two brothers. One is backstage, and the other you can see right now on camera. It's Mike Kronenberg from Noir City and Ringside Seat. Back issue and the Great Tomorrows publications as well. Welcome back, Mike.
Thanks, John. Great to be
here. Good to
see
you. And we'll see. Steve, we're talking to you. Are you ready backstage, or you still need a minute? You can give us the okay and give me an okay sign if you're ready. He's talking, but I can't tell. So I need you to do a hand gesture, Steve, of like either okay or not okay yet, or a nod yes or a nod no. Excellent. All right. I think that means yes. So yes. All right. I see a nod. Okay. Excellent. So now joining us, Mike's brother, Steve, who is also a fine contributor and publisher of horror magazines and contributor to Noir City as well, Mike?
The managing editor of Noir City.
I beg your pardon, the managing editor of Noir City. How about that? It's Steve Kronenberg, everybody. It's good to meet you, Steve, and welcome to Word Balloon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, John. Thank you both. It's great to be here.
That's great, man. We have a little bit of a delay with Steve, and it's okay. It's something that we'll work out in the future, but we'll do the best we can. This is kind of the like when you watch sometimes on the networks and they're cutting to people's homes, and there might be a second or two of a delay. So, thank you, Ethan. There's a nice guy who says I'm a treasure. Keep up the good work. Well, it's my pleasure. One of the reasons why I'm able to do the good work is I get great conversationalists like Mike and Steve to talk about some fun stuff. And it's going to be great tonight. We're talking old movies, both some of our favorite classic Hollywood movies and noirs, but also the horror world. And I look forward to delving into that. EC Comics also among the topics that we're discussing, and the world of boxing, which is surviving and kind of maybe heating up again with some of the announcements of fall fights that are coming up.
Yeah, it's the one sport that kind of paved the way, at least in this country, as far as like working in the bubble, is boxing.
It's been fun. It's been
I mean, there hasn't been any huge fights or big fights, but there's been a lot of fights. Some cancellations, but for the most part, it's been a lot of fun. Good competitive fights. So looking forward to it proceeding and hopefully getting some really big fights coming up.
Absolutely, man. And they made a big. It's funny. It's an exhibition. We may as well get this one out of the way. Oh, right. But yeah, Mike Tyson and Roy Jones getting together to fight an exhibition in September.
Quite a spectacle. It's just, everybody's going to be curious. I'm curious. I'll watch it. I'll watch two 54-year-old guys beat the shit out of each other.
Well, and Steve, I'm sure you feel the same way that today's 54 isn't our father's 54. And I'm not saying that these guys can go and fight, the cream of the crop, but they both seem in reasonable shape to pull off an 8-round exhibition. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Steve, what do you think about that?
No, which fight are you
We're talking about Roy Jones, Mike Tyson. Do you even know about that? Have you heard about that?
Don't even know.
Or are you having trouble hearing us right now, Steve? You hadn't heard about it.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you, but I thought hear about Roy Jones fighting again.
Yeah, against Mike Tyson.
Yeah, it's against Mike Tyson.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, John, about today's 54 is completely different from 54 when, let's say, I don't know. Even when you think about Joe Louis, when he was in his 30s, how he had lost it. Now you've got these guys. I mean, Tyson looks phenomenal. I haven't seen Roy Jones, but I'm sure he's in great.
He's coming out to fight again.
Yes, Mike Tyson and Roy Jones are going to fight an 8-round exhibition, and there's been some footage released of Tyson hitting the mitts. His hand speed looks great. Now, much like when Conor McGregor was prepping to fight Floyd Mayweather, gym work is one thing, but as I've been pointing out, and I've been on a couple of sports radio shows here in Chicago, and they asked me my opinion, and I'm like, the mitts don't hit back. So it's one thing to go through the motions with your trainer. It's another thing to be in with a live target. And so that's one thing that I think both men need to show. But it's an exhibition. I don't think they'll go at full steam.
Well, I think that the fact that they're both 54, aren't they? Or they're close.
I think Roy's slightly younger, but actually we should look up Roy's age.
Yeah, and it's kind of negligible. I mean, they're both in their 50s, I'm assuming.
Yeah. I'll ask Siri.
Or Roy's in his late 40s.
I'm not sure I understand.
So I think that at least it's not one of these things where an older guy's going in with a guy who's much younger than him, and it's going to be some kind of slaughter that could end up being the older guy is going to end up. Although I'm telling you, both of them could end up in the hospital. After taking.
There's been no boxing. There's been no boxing for a while, so
but you see, you
don't you guys think it's a little creepy for these guys at their age?
Well, you've been a little
at their age to be fighting.
Don't
you think that? I think that's a little crazy.
There has been boxing because in the bubble there's been Top Rank, and now DAZN is added, and Golden Boy has started doing fights in the bubble. So there have been actually quite a few fights. I mean, they were running twice a week since how many weeks? 6 weeks maybe? I
want to say it was late May.
Yeah.
Or no, pardon me, or maybe June. Yeah, it was
really big big fight, from that in that sense. But anyway,
so Roy was born in 69, January of 69.
Oh my God. Okay.
So he's 51.
Okay.
So yeah, close enough. The other thing, guys, and again, your opinions, what concerns me are more so their legs than their fists and their hand speed, because again, I go back to that Conor McGregor Floyd Mayweather fight. And as I think Floyd shows, he could still punch and he could still get out of the way of punches. But when he was walking around the ring, he was walking around the ring. I mean, it was the most flat-footed, almost plodding Floyd Mayweather I had ever seen. 41 years old. Again, I had no expectations, but he really did look his age, in my opinion. And I mean, certainly Tyson's best punches would start with his legs, and he'd spring up and was able to fight into that crouch. And Roy was losing his legs at the end of his active career and not being able to get out of the way of big punches.
And look, Tyson was losing it too.
Oh yeah.
God, it was ridiculous especially at the very end. So, it in my mind, it's a spectacle. It's almost like a freak show. It's like one of those things, almost like a car accident. You can't turn away, especially and you're gonna have to watch it. Whether I pay, what is it, $55 or something?
Something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I might end up trying to like get a pirated feed in some way. Or maybe watch the fight.
Well, when is it? When is
September. It's going to be September, Steve. And like I said, no, I mean Tyson looks like he's in
pay-per-view,
reasonable
right?
shape.
He's in great shape. He looks in great shape. I mean, as far as like
his body.
Yeah,
He is in great shape. He is in great shape. I saw a video of him, or I don't remember what it was recently, and he looks great. He looks like he's in great shape. I'm always wary of fighters at that age coming in there into the ring and subjecting their bodies at that age to that kind of punishment, unless it's going to be just sort of, as you said, an exhibition fight where they're just going to just circle each other in the ring, throw a few punches, and that's it. I always get concerned about fighters at that age getting in there and really punching it out.
Yeah, no, I mean that's one of the reasons I think of it as a kind of a spectacle and kind of a freak show, because it's like there's that dangerous element. I mean, there's always a dangerous element in boxing. Boxing always that, especially when you see like a vicious knockout or down. But man, we're talking about guys who are like over 50, and I agree with John that like over 50 in this day and age is a lot different than over 50 30 years ago, but still, holy crap.
No, it's still grueling. Absolutely.
Yep.
Steve, you were going to say something, I'm betting.
I just remember when George Foreman. I just was going to say, I remember when George Foreman finally fought his last fight, and he was about 48, I think.
Yeah.
I thought, God, he's crazy. He just got to stop. Otherwise, he's going to end up to himself, and enough to stop at that age. But I thought he just pushed it long. He was just lucky.
Yeah, and Foreman was going against guys who were younger than him too.
Absolutely, yeah. And frankly, I really thought he had done enough to earn a draw against Shannon Briggs, his final opponent. But I also think the powers that be, and especially in New Jersey, kind of almost sent a message with that loss saying, "Yeah, it's time." And he struggled against Axel Schultz.
He was taking beatings. I mean, his eyes were all swollen. His face was swollen. He before he'd even leave the ring, he already had like a huge pair of sunglasses on to hide all the swelling in his eyes.
Oh yeah. No, it's again. We'll see. Two things. Kevin Iole, who I never met on the beat, but I certainly respect his writing and his sources. The word he was getting was that they were doing this as almost a favor to Roy, that Mike and Roy Jones. So, and that's okay. Again, it's an exhibition. Roy was on with Max Kellerman and had a really interesting interview. And I thought Tyson made a very good point Tyson was on with Max Kellerman, but Mike said that wouldn't you rather see, or like he's like, listen, Jerry Rice is past his prime, but wouldn't you rather see Jerry Rice in a scrimmage versus some of the current football players out there?
I saw that quote. Yeah,
can't blame him.
Yeah, I understood that. I had no idea that it was something that they were doing for Roy Jones, because Roy Jones, I thought was almost like not an afterthought, but came in after this whole thing. I thought the whole thing was Tyson. There was that viral video that went out of him in the gym, and everybody was going nuts over the fact that how great he looked, how hard he punched, how fast his hands looked, and things started rolling from there. It seemed like, but I had no idea that if that's true, that it was this whole thing to like kind of do Roy Jones a favor. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I intriguing enough to see them even going through the motions, and I don't expect Tyson to be out for the kill and make it only, a 1-round fight. But that's why, again, it's like, do you guys have the legs to go 8 rounds?
Yeah. Let's go 4 rounds. I mean, we'll see.
Right. So but we'll see. We'll get back to boxing. I want to talk more about also.
That's a good point.
What are we gonna? Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, you're breaking up, Steve, really bad.
I was saying it's what you made about them having the legs.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I just think they're too old, but it should.
It's like we're waiting for a telegraph message to come through.
Yeah,
unfortunately,
you're breaking up something awful. It's just. It's really...
Oh man, and man, Steve, I really want to talk to you about when we get into horror films. I really want to talk to you about the shock movies. What was the package called, Mike?
The Shock. It was a Shock Theater. It was a
Shock Theater.
Steve, it was the Shock. It's a Shock Theater press kit, right? Press book, or that you ended up getting.
The Shock. It was the Shock book, right?
The Shock package.
Right, which for people who don't know what we're talking about, Mike Cooper, by the way, says what's a great Tyson fight to watch on YouTube. I mean, really, dude, just any Mike Tyson KO will satisfy.
Any of the stuff from what 86 to up to 88, I would say.
Yeah.
It kind of all went downhill after Buster Douglas. So
watch his fight with Larry Holmes. That's a good one to watch.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you just want to see Tyson wail on people,
Tyrell Biggs, his fight.
That was the name that I was going to think of. Tyrell Biggs, absolutely. A great competitive fight that he had before he had the title. Tyson and I think Quick Tillis. James Quick Tillis was a very good fight.
Yeah, definitely. That was a good fight. That was his biggest test.
Agreed. Absolutely. So back to Shock Theater. Here's the cover that Mike sent me.
What that is that Steve ended up getting. It was kind of like his holy grail was to get. There was a Shock Theater book that was released the movie to the television stations in the 50s. That was the promotional material that they used, that the TV studios used, right, Steve, for of the Universal horror movies. And this is like Zachary, when Zachary was showing all the movies and all the horror hosts.
Yeah, it was
first started. This kind of got Famous Monsters going and everything,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's so you guys had Zachary, correct? As a host.
Michael was.
I did.
What you guys were showing on the screen.
Yeah, Steve, we're not even hearing you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Steve.
Yeah, I'm not even hearing you, Steve.
Something, Steve. God, I hope you won't be frustrated by this, but I think we're gonna invite you back when you are able to. What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, because unless you're able to improve the Wi-Fi connection, your Wi-Fi connection, your connection is breaking up because of your Wi-Fi connection.
Yeah,
and it has to do probably with the StreamYard software because it worked with Zoom. He and I did a Zoom meeting and we didn't have a problem.
But you guys were Dutch.
We're not having any problems.
Yeah, we're smooth. We can hear each other fine and even talk over each other.
I can't hear you. I can see you, but you're like a still.
You're frozen right now.
Still picture.
You look better than that face that I just made. Don't worry. So please, I'm gonna say, if you, it's up to you. There you go. He's left. I was going to say if he wanted to mess with it and see if he could do better.
I think maybe with if we tried Google Chrome and get Google Chrome on your computer, it might work better than your phone.
Definitely. So yeah, I mean, if it's okay, yeah, again, you can see and you can test and we could try a little bit later, but yeah, I would say right now.
Yeah, you're still breaking it. You're just
still
like a still picture.
Yeah. So, well, I appreciate the attempt, Stephen. Do really sincerely. We will fix this, and you will come back, and then we'll have a lovely conversation. Because I was really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on shock theater and everything, and yeah, discussing that because I'm fascinated by that period as well. I've talked to Sven Gulli here in Chicago many times, and the matinee hosts and the monster hosts that we had in Chicago from the 50s up to Sven Gulli. He inherited the show from he was the son of Sven Gulli originally, and Jerry G. Bishop, another great Chicago broadcaster, was the original Sven Gulli, going back to the 60s. And then Rich Coase, who plays Sven Gulli, wrote for him and interned for him.
Yeah,
and a couple.
Go
ahead, Mike.
I'm going to grab the book because in the book, Sven Gulli, I believe we had different writers write about hosts, all the horror hosts. So Sven Gulli was one of the horror hosts that somebody wrote about. So I'm going to go off screen.
Sure. Yeah, it's it's an amazing tradition that started in the 50s, right when television was really becoming widespread, and Universal having that brilliant notion of packaging all the monster movies and calling it shock theater, and all these local hosts across the country, as Steve well knows and Mike well knows, popped up. And God, sometimes it was the newsman on weekends. Even SCTV, Count Floyd would make fun. They had a parody of your classic kind of shock theater host. Here, Mike, I'm going to isolate you so we can see you in the full screen.
Okay.
There we go.
So this is the book. What it is a reprint of the original package. So the original package was this kind of spiral bound, interesting pack that was. It was almost like a press kit. If anybody can. If anybody knows what the old time movie press kits were,
sure,
which were folders that contained stills and contained promotional materials and actually things like scripts for television commercials and for radio commercials, poster images and things like that. And that's kind of what this was. And it was for the TV stations to use to promote this package of movies, which was like the original Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein, all the great classic Universal horror movies. And it's just an amazing thing to go through because it's got great photographs in it, and it's got all of these really cool quotes for these horror hosts to use when they hosted and showed these movies. This, like with so many materials, like promotional materials like that stuff got thrown away, got tossed out, and it's very rare. I mean, it's an incredibly rare thing, and it's almost like this holy grail among like classic horror movie collectors that is like, well, I want one of those, I want to find one of those, and that was something that Steve always wanted to get. And we were able to get it at a horror convention from a monster magazine dealer. His name was Steve Dolnick. And he ended up taking us up to his hotel room. And it was very funny. It's like, I wish Steve could tell this, but it was, he was this really kind of nervous, anxious guy. And he didn't tell us what it was going to be that he was going to show us. He was, I got to show you guys this thing. He's really crazy about it. He's really uptight. And it was funny, but it was a little strange too. So we go up to his room and he pulls out this, big, I guess suitcase, and he opens it up, and the shock booklet is in there. He knew that Steve wanted it. and he wanted us to look at it, and he's talking about it and promoting it and everything. And it reminded me, and I said afterwards, I said to Steve, I said, it reminded me of that scene in Taxi Driver where the hepped up speed guy on speed it takes Travis Bickle up to the seedy hotel room to show him all the weapons he's going to buy. I said, this was just freaking bizarre. So Steve ended up getting it. This was many years ago. This was maybe about 20 years ago, maybe a little more. And Jim Clatterbow, who we put Monsters from the Vault out with, the horror movie magazine, the classic horror magazine that we did, and the three of us did it. We kind of came up with the idea, what if, since people want to see it, nobody's seen this thing, it's so rare, what if we reprint it? I scanned it, and we reprint it and put it in book form. And basically, that's what this is.
Yeah.
That's my son right there.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I created this. This book is like 20 years old, but I just created this just from all kinds of things. I just did it in Photoshop. But the inside, if you can see,
Harold, I'm going to solo you again. Go ahead.
Zachary wrote the introduction to the book, but this is the front of the actual Shock promotion book. This is what it looks like.
Wow.
So that's the front cover.
Okay.
So I don't know who the artist was who created that. And basically, you had pages like this.
Uh-huh.
So with promotional material.
Cool.
And then each movie was highlighted. You know, you had things like ideas for audience promotion, you know?
Sure.
Shock show, like sales promotion. And then what it goes into is a TV schedule, a possible Shock TV schedule for the TV.
Wow. And look how many movies it is, too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, shoot.
Like almost a year's worth without repeating, I'm assuming.
And there's just a ton of stuff. There's 40s B horror films in there. There's the classics that are in there, but there's all these 40s B horror. But each movie is also highlighted with its own page. So,
that's great. Facts and everything.
Yeah. So what we also did was we didn't just reprint the book. What we also did was we had writers talk about their experiences growing up, watching Shock Theater.
Sure.
And like we did. There's stuff about the different horror hosts. Trying to see what else if we got Svengoolie in here.
That's so funny. That's great, man. And I mean, like, obviously then, I mean, the hosts became local celebrities, and, certainly Halloween, they were very popular, and they'd be at supermarkets and other, shopping centers and things, and signing autograph pictures and things like that. I mean, I certainly remember even before Sven, the current Svengoolie, the original Svengoolie, doing it. And he had white makeup and had almost like, he looked like a dead hippie, like a zombie hippie, basically. Right. And he was so funny. And then just great stuff. He used to say at the end of his show, don't forget to brush your fangs, bite your mommy goodnight, and drink your milk before it clots. Right. I just remember that in particular. And
John, are you still watching Svengoolie on Saturday night?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, man. I love him. And he's really become I wouldn't go so far because I don't want to presume, but we seem to enjoy each other's company. And I am proud to say when he does his panels at the Chicago Comics conventions, if he knows I'm at the show, he's like, "You're moderating my panel again, right?" And it's like, dude, it's an honor. Are you kidding me? And it's great because he's so I see a kinship in our careers broadcasting wise, because he started in radio when radio was still more fun. And there was sketch comedy happening in radio along with playing music. Mm-hmm. And he would make parody songs as he does on his TV show. And the sketches he does now in Svengoolie, he would do non-monster sketches on radio. And yeah, I always tell him, I'm like, dude, you have the career that I kind of was shooting for. I don't know if I wanted to be a horror host, but as far as and just he's the last of that great inventive local television thing that has gone the way of the dinosaur. I mean, it's really local TV is court shows and
and
reality.
I see his show trending on Twitter, not necessarily trending, but I see people that I follow who are watching the show and hashtagging Svengoolie on it. Steve grew up watching Zachary. I mean, he actually saw the original Zachary.
That's great. Tell us about that, Steve. Tell us any memories of watching Zachary in action and how he would host.
I don't know if we're getting anything right now.
Oh, buddy, I'm sorry. All right. There you go. Well, yeah, maybe we should try another day then with Steve. I hate to say it. So yeah, if you want to text him or whatever, Mike, to let him know. I'm so sorry, Steve, and I really do hope that we will in the future get an opportunity. Okay, he knows because he just left the studio, so he must have heard us, and that's heartbreaking, man. But we'll do it again. I mean, hey. And Michael Cooper asked earlier if I will be doing this weekly. Sometimes it's hard to get the band together to do it weekly. So at the very least, I'm going to try and do it monthly. And also, it's funny, I was talking to Gabe Hardman last night as we were doing our Outer Limits rewatch, and I've got my East Coast people that I want to do Scene Missing with, and my West Coast ones. And Mike, I know you're enough of a night owl that you probably wouldn't mind, hanging out with the West Coast people.
Oh yeah, I could definitely. Because working with Eddie Muller, and Vince Keenan, who are both on the West Coast, so I mean, all that stuff.
That would be great. That would be great.
As I'm working on, or any conversations I have with them, is all on West Coast time.
Sure. No, and I certainly have my group of West Coast creators, and also coming from overnight radio, as I've been doing for several years and stuff. It's I'm okay.
John, I see you like when I wake up to work in the morning at 7 a.m. and it's like, wait, what is John doing? He's up. What is he doing? And I'm thinking to myself, does he sleep?
I sleep all around the clock for maybe 3 hours here and 4 hours there. And in fact, Mike, I was direct messaging Tom Taylor from Australia, and we're going to do Monday morning. We will be doing a word balloon at 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. my time. So yeah, I mean, it's we're again to accommodate Tom's schedule, and Tom being on the other side of the world and working with American publishers. Sure. His hours are all over the place. Right. So yeah, I look forward to that. He's got some really cool stuff coming up, both for DC and also his own independent stuff as well.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to his stuff. I like Tom's work. Yeah, so yeah, if you ever want to include me on a West Coast late
great.
Night, I'm there for you.
That's excellent, man. No, that's terrific. And yeah, Gabe is a great movie buff. Jeff Parker. Great writer, and he's he's in Portland. He's another great guy. East Coast wise, Dean Haspiel wants to join us too, and I'd love to have Dean on and talk about stuff. Yeah. I tease him, and I also want him to do it. His godmother was Shelley Winters, and if you hadn't heard of that conversation, she would babysit him, and Farley Granger lived in their building. And he would see, and he's like, if I knew that, he's a 5-year-old kid having no idea that this is the guy from Strangers on a Train and all the other great Farley Granger movies, Rope and everything. Yeah. And De Niro was being directed by Shelley on stage productions in New York, and De Niro would babysit Dean.
That's funny. Yeah,
so it's like Dean's got, and I'm like, Dean, you got to make a book, because also, Shelley. It's a very interesting. A lot of actors, we might discover them. A generation might discover them in their old age, and not know them at their full power. And Shelley had such an amazing career.
Well, it's her longevity. I mean, when you think about her, the way she was Place in the Sun. You think about her and He Ran All the Way with John Garfield, where she's opposite John Garfield and she's an ingenue.
Yes.
And then she wins her Academy Award for Poseidon Adventure. Late in her career.
Absolutely.
And what? Bloody Mama. She was in Bloody Mama with Robert De Niro. Robert De Niro played one of her sons in Bloody Mama.
Yep. Roger Corman movie, absolutely, about Mom Parker and everything. It's a fascinating career. And also the fact that she directed as well as, acted and everything. It's like, a lot, like I said, a lot of people I don't think realize the breadth of her character or of her career and the characters she played. I mean, God, she's the mom in Lolita. Just fascinating career.
Yeah. She's done it all. She's also very, very political. She campaigned for. I know she campaigned for Kennedy. I know she campaigned for McGovern. So she was very politically involved too.
So that's the thing. I think it's a strong woman that I think a lot of younger women would find inspiration from her career and her accomplishments and everything. So I always bully Dean about I'm like, you got to make that book, man. Yeah. I'm like, you owe it to her and everything. And he laughs, but I'm like, I'm serious. And he knows it and he sees it too. And it was funny, Whitney Matheson from formerly of USA Today, who's a great pop culture writer and columnist and stuff. She's like, oh, I'd love to read that story. I'm like, there you go, Dean. There's your focus group. Come on, man. Let's go. So, Greg Jones, do you guys have any thoughts on Rutger Hauer's performance in Hobo with a Shotgun?
Okay, I know that. That's my best buddy, Greg Jones.
Okay.
Lifelong friend. Steve and I showed him Hobo with a Shotgun. Have you ever seen Hobo with a Shotgun?
I have not. Tell me.
Okay. It's just like this sleazy B-grade film. Rutger Hauer is like a homeless hobo, and he's being tormented by the kind of mafia gang that are in this city, and they're drug dealers and they're the worst kind of lowlifes, and it's just an extreme the most extreme lowlifes and pieces of shit that could possibly be alive. And of course they're tormenting everybody in that town, and of course Rutger Hauer too, and he ends up taking revenge with a shotgun on the entire family. It's a family. It's kind of like this family. It's really, really sleazy, but it's a lot of fun. It's got a great kind of, the design for the poster is this really cool retro design for the poster. If anybody hasn't heard of it or wants to look it up, Google it. Google Hobo with a Shotgun. I'm sure the poster will come up. You'll see it. I dare you not to be intrigued. I don't know where it's streaming. I'm sure it's streaming somewhere. It's got to be streaming somewhere. It could be streaming on YouTube. I don't know, but it is. If you can stomach it, I mean, it's very violent. If you can stomach it, but it's tongue in cheek. It's extremely tongue in cheek, too.
It's on Tubi. It's on Tubi, and that's great because honestly, I think Tubi is one of the secret streaming weapons that people take for granted and should absolutely watch more.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Tubi, and it's a free streamer. They do embed commercials, but it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it, and they have a lot of obscure television. They have Greg, delivering justice one shell at a time.
That's part of the promotion for it. My buddy Greg, he was I grew up with that guy, okay, and all the stuff that I wrote about in Batcave Companion, all those comics I bought with him. I mean,
that's great.
Comic book collectors together, and we grew up as comic book collectors together. So but anyways, I have to say that I recommend it, but don't come to me and get pissed at me that you watched it and you hated it and you thought it was violent and you thought it was sleazy, because that's exactly what it is.
That's all right. As Howard Chaykin always says, I like smut. I like filth. I like smut.
This is smut.
All right, fair enough. That's good.
Buddy.
Smut, not snuff, everybody. I don't want anyone to misconstrue.
Yeah, right, yeah. Although some people get their lives snuffed out, but it's not for real, okay?
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, Tubi is great in terms of being a free streamer that has a lot of films and a lot of television. And sometimes they have, just like they always say, you know, they have movies that show up on Amazon Prime and Netflix for 6 months or whatever. So you can enjoy them on Tubi with, again, unfortunately, with commercials. Like one of my favorite television shows, and it only lasted 2 seasons, but I love how crazy it is. Car 54, Where Are You? Nat Hykins.
Oh yeah.
And they have both seasons. And it's weird because Amazon Prime has the second season available on Prime Video. The first season you have to pay for. And I mean, it's so great because Joey Ross is his own kind of weird phenomenon, but Fred Gwynn and Al Lewis, Herman Munster and Grandpa.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's what I remember in the episodes that I've watched. I haven't watched. I can't say that I've watched as many of those as I have of like some of the other classic stuff. Like Honeymooners is something that I'm like obsessed with.
Sure.
39 episodes of the Honeymooners, but definitely Car 54. I love that, especially with Fred Gwynn.
And Al Lewis is just so street, and I mean, because Fred Gwynn really does play more the straight man, although he has his moments of zany as well. And Al Lewis is outstanding and just always complaining and angry. And Charlotte Ray, Mrs. Garrett from Different Strokes and the Facts of Life,
yeah, Charlotte Ray, sure, plays
Al Lewis's wife, and he's Leo Schnauzer, and she's Sylvia Schnauzer. And she is manic. She is, I mean, just absolutely full and like Jerry Lewis crazy in the best ways, and just full throttle insanity.
This is on Tubi has this.
Yes.
The other show, if we're talking about like kind of like really classic TV that was just like is underappreciated in my opinion, is the Abbott and Costello TV show.
Let's talk about that because I'll be honest.
The greatest cheap humor ever. Okay. I mean, it's just hilarious. Joe Besser and it's just, great stuff. I love that show.
Mike, I'll tell you, you are not alone. And a lot of great comedians adore the Abbott and Costello television show. I find it so insufferable. And also Joe Besser, the one of the final stooges during the Columbia Shorts era. He was the last of the, after Shemp passed away, he was the final third stooge before they started making the feature films with Curly Joe DeRita.
Joe DeRita, and they started making Three Stooges Meet Hercules and the Three Stooges Around the World in 80 Days. And
yes, and their Western with Adam West, The Outlaws, is coming.
That's correct. Yeah, The Outlaws is coming.
Yep. But yeah, I don't know, man. Abbott and Costello. Well, first of all, what freaks me out is Joe Besser as Stinky.
The Stinky.
Who's this man-child, literally. And it's weird because on the show, I don't know where my camera went. Hold on. There we go. We're back. Stinky is a character that's supposed to be a little boy.
Right.
But he is a
man. He's a big man.
And he and Lou get into fights, and Bud Abbott's like, hey, he's only a kid, leave him alone. And as a 4-year-old, I remember being like, no, he's not. What the hell are they doing? Why don't they all see that he's a man? What the hell's going on?
I remember always like people talking about the TV show is like like when people would talk about the worst television shows ever made, sometimes people were talking about the Abbott and Costello TV show. And I just think it's so damn stupid and it's hilarious. It's just like kind of low grade humor. I mean, I love that show. And
I understand and at the end, they always do one of their burlesque routines.
Yeah.
And that's always fun.
Right.
And I share your fascination with the Honeymooners, even the Lost episodes.
I'm not a big fan of the Lost episodes. I think they're good for a curiosity, but to me, it's like those 39 episodes, the 39 episodes man, they just had it down. I mean,
Yes.
they just had it down. So from a curiosity's point, like those episodes are really intriguing to watch. How they built, the chemistry between them all and everything. But the 39, the original 39 is they're just so great.
Oh,
they're so
absolutely. And so many classic episodes.
I wish Steve was on here because it was like that was like a thing in our family of just like quoting lines, from the Honeymooners, and laughing about it. It's just like the endless, Cronenberg joke. So, and actually, I was too young to even remember it, but I was born in New Jersey, and my Steve lived a long time in New Jersey. He was born in Brooklyn, and my other brother, Bruce, grew up in New Jersey.
That's cool.
Up in Miami. We moved down to Miami.
Oh my God. Well, the Jackie Gleason country.
That's what I was about to say, was that we went and saw the Honeymooners. We saw the Jackie Gleason show. And we saw when they did the Honeymooners, when they were doing the Honeymooners and they went to Europe. And they would remember it. And that was when it was a variety, almost like a variety show. They would break out into musical numbers.
Yes.
Musical numbers. So I don't remember it. I don't remember it. I was too young.
That's amazing. I remember watching that on TV. And also in the lost episodes.
Yeah, I've watched those Miami ones. And like, again, they're interesting from a curiosity. They're all in color. Jane Keane is in it.
Sheila McRae. Yeah.
Sheila McRae.
They're Alice and Trixie on the ones from the 60s that were the video color episodes and everything. Yeah. Right. And then, but it's interesting in the lost episodes, that's where they originally did the European trip with Joyce Meadows and or rather Audrey Meadows and Joyce Randolph. And they perform the same songs. And it really was amazing because they were Broadway quality show tunes that were written for weekly television. And you have to give those composers and lyricists credit for being able to hammer that shit out every week.
Oh, yeah. The people that Gleason had working for him, I don't know if you've ever read that biography, and I can't think of the author right now. It's a great biography about Gleason. Title may be The Great One.
Yes, I have. Absolutely.
That great biography really gives you insight into Jackie Gleason. The good and the bad, warts and all. But what I appreciated was what a genius Gleason was. I mean,
yes,
he was just brilliant. And he was also a phenomenal actor when he wanted to be. I mean, when you look at him in The Hustler, and
Soldier in the Rain.
He had something. The Hustler. The Hustler's just a phenomenal movie to begin.
Oh yeah,
the entire film. But he's fantastic in it, and he just had an amazing talent. He really did, and he had a great vision, and he also had that photographic memory. He never rehearsed the Honeymooners. It drove everybody else crazy. But he had this photographic memory, and he could go on, and he just did it. I mean, it was just like a almost impromptu kind of. It's amazing. It's pretty amazing.
They had to live rehearse with a stand-in,
right?
Because Gleason just did not want to be bothered. Maybe he thought his performance would be better if it was spontaneous.
Yeah.
And also, and again, like you said, warts and all, fascinating that he and Art Carney were such a great comedy team. And at times when Carney could have shined a little bit more, it almost seemed like Gleason kept him down. Gleason was sick for a while during the variety show, and Carney easily could have stepped in and hosted, and Gleason wouldn't let him almost. I mean, it was just, it wouldn't happen.
That was something in the book that really, I had always assumed that maybe that they were close. And then after I had the toy, never mind.
Yeah, that is, boy, there's an inappropriate movie for today's audiences. Yeah.
But I always thought that they were close. And after I read the book, I exactly what you said, John. Gleason tried to keep him down. There was a jealousy there. Gleason, because Carney ended up winning an Academy Award for Harry and Tonto, and Gleason was so jealous. He was so jealous of him.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Carney's post-Honeymooners career, he had his bouts with alcoholism, and as you know, the original Felix Unger on stage, and I guess Matthau terrorized Carney on the Odd Couple stage. So, Mike, I didn't know if you saw, but a couple months ago, and we can even talk a little bit about it tonight if you are. I'm a massive Odd Couple fan, beyond fan. First of all, I think that play is bulletproof to the point that literally
100%.
sixth graders can perform that and get laughs because the material is that good.
We're in sync on that movie because I watched the TV show as a kid growing up, and I kind of liked it, especially being a big sports fan.
Sure.
Cassell would be brought on. I think they had other athletes were on there. New York athletes would be on there.
Deacon Jones was on there. Bubba Smith was on there.
Yeah. So I wasn't a fan of Tony Randall. I like Tony Randall, but I didn't like him as Felix Unger. But the movie, and of course I never saw the play.
Sure.
I think my parents went and saw the Broadway play because they saw a lot of stuff. My parents got to see Brando and Streetcar. They got to see.
Wow.
They saw John Garfield in Golden Boy.
Yeah. Golden Boy. Sure.
Blacklisted. He did Golden Boy.
Wow.
But anyways, that movie, that's like my wife. That's our movie because we watched it. We went to her father's mountain retreat on our honeymoon, and there was like nothing to watch, and he had a recorded videotape of The Odd Couple. So we watched The Odd Couple, and we just kind of fell in love with it. And just The Odd Couple is like our movie now. And we watched it. I've watched it so many times. I love it. We've been married 30 years. We still quote lines. Quote lines from the movie. So I'm with you. I love that movie. It is bulletproof. That's exactly what it is. It's bulletproof.
Yeah. Well, and I'll be honest. I love the television show, and I love the difference between Tony Randall's Felix Unger and Jack Lemmon's. And also I am fascinated by, because it's a play that certainly has had runs, across the country. Mm-hmm. And it was such a successful play. It's interesting, like Eddie Bracken, the great Preston Sturgis actor from Hail the Conquering Hero and Miracle of Morgan's Creek. He played Felix on stage. Pat Hingle, who was Commissioner Gordon, as you know, in the Batman movies, he was Oscar. It's interesting seeing the actors that played both Felix and Oscar over the years.
Yeah, I've never seen a stage production of it. But
we did it in high school, and I got to be Oscar, and it was great. And then we had a blast doing it, me and my buddy Rob, and it was great that we were able to do it. And that the teachers trusted us with the roles and everything. But yeah, we had a ball, and we were massive fans of the movie already. We did, and I certainly didn't do a Matthau imitation. I did Angry Me, and it worked. But again, like they did.
You'd be a good Oscar. You'd be a good Oscar.
If you could see my apartment right now, I am absolutely Oscar Madison. I refer to myself as Oscar all the time. And also again, like they did a women's version of it with Rita Moreno and Sally Struthers, and Rita Moreno became Olive Madison, and Sally Struthers was Frances, which was Felix's wife's name in the film. So that's interesting. The Black Odd Couple with Ron Glass and Damon Wilson.
Damon Wilson, yeah, I remember that. I watched that as a kid.
Me too.
I really liked that. I was really into that show. It got canceled, I think, after the first season, but I wanted that season. I wanted that to go. I like that more than almost the.
That's interesting, and I understand.
Not that I think Jack Klugman was a great Oscar. It was my only problem was with
Tony Randall.
It didn't work for me, his interpretation, because I guess I thought more about what Jack Lemmon brought to the role and who he was. I think Jack Lemmon played him more as a guy who was obsessive compulsive, who was a neurotic. He was a news writer. He wasn't somebody who was so. He went bowling with Oscar. He played pool with Oscar.
Oh yeah,
he was that's what I liked about it. He was one of the guys, whereas Tony Randall was more of like
a bon vivant.
Yeah, it was. So I. like that traditional, interpretation of Oscar 11.
I hated the new one that they did with Matthew Perry and Tom Lennon. However, Tom Lennon was a very good Felix Unger, and he was kind of in that Tony Randall mold, but I really thought he was effective. Where I think the show went wrong, a couple things. Matt Perry, you had two Felixes. I didn't buy Matt Perry as a good-looking Oscar. I didn't like that they changed him from a newspaper sports columnist to a sports talk radio person, and I say that as someone who worked in that business for a really long time. They tried to just update it in silly ways, which I found frustrating. And I just never, when they announced it and said it was the two actors, I'm like, Chandler Bing is a descendant of Felix Unger, and as far as Friends goes and his roles. And I'm like, you really have two Felixes here. I don't know who would have played a good modern day Oscar. I suppose I'm trying to think of like a heavy guy a heavy street guy that's a television actor.
The mind right now. It's so hard for me, other than Matthau. I mean, Matthau was just,
good Lord.
I mean, God, everything.
He was born to play it.
He was born to play it, and then you think about Matthau just as an actor.
Love that though.
70s, those 3 70s noir that he did. The Laughing Policeman and Taking a Pelham 123 and Charlie Varick. I mean, those 3 movies are just,
they're the best.
I mean, 1970s noir is like, is defined by those 3 movies, in particular Pelham. I mean, Taking a Pelham 123 is like, when you talk about a bulletproof TV, like a bulletproof play, that's a bulletproof movie. I mean,
agreed.
And through that remake, I'm not talking about a remake. I'm just
it's been remade. I know. Jeff Loeb and I were talking and doing our usual comic book conversation, and he knows how much of a Matthau fan I was, and he's like, they're remaking it with Denzel. I'm like, why? And I'm like, that's not a good idea. And he laughed, and Tony Scott directed it. And also, I have yet to see it, but there was a TV movie remake in between with Edward James Olmos in it. And I don't know if Edward James Olmos was Garver, the Matthau character, or if he played one of the thieves, but I know he was the lead as far as the billing.
Did that come out?
Like late 90s, like 98, right. I want to say. And on the encores, you see it every now and then run. Okay. So, and I keep meaning to DVR it and really see. But no, I agree with you in terms of Matthau at his best. Oh, that's interesting. Donald Loge would be a good Oscar. I suppose so. That's actually, absolutely, man. That's a very good point. So, I could see that.
Also, he was in King Creole?
Oh, Matthau had a fascinating career before Fortune Cookie, which was his.
Wasn't he in Failsafe also?
He's in Failsafe. He's in Facing the Crowd, the Kazan Bud Schulberg film. Right. He's a great actor. No, he's in a lot of interest, and of course, did a lot of early TV, Naked City and anthology shows like that before Fortune Cookie really put him on the map, and with that Oscar nomination he got.
Yep.
Artie Lang is Oscar. Sure, Artie Lang would be a great Oscar. That's a very good point.
Yeah.
I could totally see that. That'd be great.
He would be good, but it's like, boy, it'd be hard to look at him right now, the way he looks. So it's like,
I know, it is heartbreaking.
I'm glad that he's clean. I know that now he's clean, which is great, because I used to listen to him on Howard Stern when he was, but boy, he's hard to look at, man.
The guy has no nose cartilage, and it's grotesque. Real fast. He had one of my favorite lines when he was on Howard Stern, and they had a playmate in the studio, and she's like, "Well, I go to college," and they go, "Where do you go to college?" And she went to the University of Pennsylvania in Indiana, Pennsylvania, which is, by the way, Jimmy Stewart's hometown. And Carney laughs and goes, "Indiana, Pennsylvania." He goes, "What do you need to get into that school? A number 2 pencil?" Which I thought was a great line. That's one of my favorite jokes getting into college. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, that's great.
More Matthau, more Odd Couple.
Well, I wanted to just say, you can't forget Bad News Bears, which is a great movie. He's
I have another one beyond that too.
one of the best baseball movies, but also I want to say that Bill Lancaster wrote that script, okay, which is Burt Lancaster's son. And
I didn't know that. Please go on.
Yes, and he wrote the script for John Carpenter's The Thing.
Wow.
So, and we all love The Thing. I mean, I don't know who doesn't love The Thing. And I was going to actually kind of hopefully bring this up with Steve, because when he and I saw The Thing with my father, the summer it came out, we were the only ones in the theater. It was a complete failure. But what people always remember about The Thing is the fantastic special effects by Rob Bottin, and so, but goddamn, that's an amazing script. Bill Lancaster's script is so phenomenal. He just doesn't get enough credit. Not enough people talk about that great script that he wrote from that. And of course, he based it on the original story of Who Goes There. It was much closer to that than the Howard Hawks version of The Thing.
Understood. A. Johnson, and I was going to mention this movie. He says Hopscotch is his favorite Matthau film. And yeah, that's a great spy movie that is really funny, really great Cold War humor. Sam Waterston is great in it. Herbert Lom, who played Inspector Dreyfus in the Pink Panther films with Peter Sellers, excellent in the film. Ned Beatty is amazing as the asshole CIA department head that hates Matthau with a passion, wants to see him fired.
Movie ages. I haven't seen that movie in ages.
It's so great. Roland Neame, the British director, made it. It's on Criterion, both as a disc and on the Criterion channel.
I'll have to look for that.
And it's amazing. It really is great.
That needs a rewatch.
Glenda Jackson plays his love interest. And another great, wasn't it not The Hospital? What was their movie?
Plaza Suite?
Plaza Suite's great too with Maureen Stapleton.
Right. Glenda Jackson and Walter Matthau.
House Calls. Which was made into a television show with Lynn Redgrave. And that was an okay TV show. But the film with Matthau and Glenda Jackson is fantastic. And they had tremendous chemistry.
Wasn't Bernard Hughes in House Calls, right?
Yep. It's funny, this Sunday.
Good character actor, Barnard Hughes.
I agree. And well, first of all, watch the 70s Bob Newhart show and see Barnard Hughes as his father, whose sole passion is.
Well, I watched that show. I love that show, the Bob Newhart show. The original Bob Newhart show was so great.
Yeah, and I'm in my older age, I'm warming up slightly to the 80s show Newhart. But man, I'll tell you again, another bulletproof show. That original 70s show. And Barnard Hughes is his dad, who is obsessed with fly fishing and literally constantly making lures. And I forget the lady's name who plays his mother, but they were very funny. And Barnard Hughes, actually, this Sunday, this is my favorite month for old movies because of Turner Classic Movies, when they do one day and they feature one star for the entire day.
Yeah.
And in fact, yesterday was Burt Lancaster, speaking of Bill Lancaster. But Sunday is Goldie Hawn, which I'm glad that they're letting some of the more modern stars seep in. Mm-hmm. And they're going to show, it's not a great movie, but it's Burt Reynolds and Goldie Hawn, and it's called Best Friends. And it's about a husband and wife screenwriting. Or no.
What, 1979 maybe? 70?
Oh, I think early 80s. I think, or maybe even mid 80s. Maybe even mid 80s. Okay. But Barnard Hughes plays, I believe, I can't remember if it's definitely Goldie Hawn's father, and he's got a great little turn in that movie.
I just wanted to look up. I couldn't remember. I want to look up when that movie came out.
I'm betting mid '80s because I think I saw it when I was in college.
You might be right. Yeah.
Ron Silver's in it, and it's like I said, not a perfect movie, but I like it because it's a slightly gentler.
82.
82. Okay, slightly Wow. So I guess I was still in high school. Slightly gentler Burt Reynolds. My favorite gentle Burt Reynolds comedy from late 70s is Starting Over. And it's
Starting Over is a good movie.
And it's a James Brooks.
Jill Clayburgh, right?
Jill Clayburgh is the love interest. And also, Candice Bergen is hilarious in the film.
Yeah.
And lets her be. She's an aspiring songwriter who starts to find success after she divorces Reynolds, and all of her songs are based on breakups with Reynolds. So every time he hears one of these songs, and he's on a date with somebody, and there's a woman like Mary Kay plays one of his dates that don't go well, and she's singing one of his ex-wife's songs, and just the look of disgust on his face. James Brooks made it, and it's the closest thing you'd get to if Burt Reynolds had ever done an MTM production 70s sitcom.
You've got Burt Reynolds, the vulnerable Burt Reynolds, which you didn't get a lot. You didn't get Burt Reynolds, and I'm a fan of Burt Reynolds. I mean, I like Burt Reynolds.
Me too.
The movie Sharky's Machine was filmed in Atlanta, right around the campus of my art school. So all of the sets on that were filmed like right outside, my school, which was right in Midtown Atlanta. I rewatched that movie. I remember seeing it when it came out, and I really liked it. It hasn't aged quite as well. It's kind of a remake of Laura. Of which? Yeah, Laura.
Oh, Laura, interesting. I didn't put that together. That's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, he's the detective. He falls in love with can't think of the beautiful actress British actress in that movie.
I can't remember either right now.
She's dead, and he becomes obsessed with her after she's dead.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
That's the link, and it was definitely. I mean, Reynolds did it. He wanted to do the story because it was kind of an updated version.
And that's kind of why I love Reynolds as well, for all of his cheese, as he kind of fell in love with himself in the 80s. And I mean, hey, he was the top box office guy. Yeah. So I think that's interesting. But even like he made that movie Rough Cut, where he's a jewel thief, and he really did love old Hollywood.
Yep. That's not a bad movie either. I mean, his stuff is entertaining. It's fun. I mean, some of it's really, really bad. I mean, the Cannonball Run stuff I hated. That wasn't good stuff. But I mean, I guess it's good for
but that's like that, and Paternity is another kind of throwaway. I mean, he was batting 500. I mean, he'd make good movies, but he'd make shit too.
Gator, that's
Gator's a great movie.
Yeah, man, Gator's great. Where he's like the bootlegger, and Anyway, so I there's some stuff. There's definitely some stuff.
And I'm glad at the end, that last movie he made with the kid from Modern Family, Ariel Winter, where he kind of plays a version of himself where he's an aging cowboy star that I can't remember the name of it right now, but it was interesting because he made that movie, and Sam Elliott made a similar movie as well called The Hero.
Okay.
But Reynolds' last movie, it was good, and he goes to this little film festival thinking it's going to be in a theater and everything. It's in a bar. It really is kids absolutely worshiping him, but it is such a low rent film festival that he's disgusted. And Ariel Winter plays his keeper, and he kind of takes her off on an odyssey, and they go on a road trip for the weekend, and initially are blowing off the festival because he's so embarrassed by it. The Last Movie Star. Thank you, Ed. That absolutely is the name of the movie, and it's nice. I think he was able to get one last great thing. Oh, now that's funny. A. Johnson points out Evening Shade, and I heard Mary Lou Henner say that on Evening Shade, he was so disinterested, and yet the show ran for like 4 or 5 seasons. Mm-hmm. He wouldn't learn his lines, and he had a hidden earpiece, and they would feed him his lines.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I guess you can say that's it's not being interested, but also, I don't get into this controversy, but Marlon Brando, people criticize him, but for the cue cards that he had for The Godfather, and also for wearing an earpiece for some of his movies, but he did do it for spontaneity, and you were talking about Jackie Gleason. That he wanted that. And when I read that book about Gleason, and I read about that's how he wanted to work. He had to work that way. He didn't like rehearsal because he wanted the spontaneity. And that's kind of what Brando wanted. He wanted to improvise. He wanted that spontaneity. So I thought of Brando when I read that about Gleason.
I know you're a massive Brando fan. The score, I think, thankfully, is a strong late Brando performance.
Yeah. No, he's got Don Juan, the movie.
Yeah, Don Juan DeMarco. Yeah,
he's very good in that.
Yes.
It's a fun look. There's no doubt after Last Tango in Paris, he said, "I'm never doing this again. I'm never putting myself into this again. I'll be a professional. I'll work. I'll do movies. That I want to do, but I'm never gonna put my heart and soul into something like it's too painful." I just read this excellent biography of him. I don't remember the author, but it's like 700 pages. And we talk about another actor person in Hollywood who was just like came from a terrible upbringing, alcoholic parents, abusive. Anyways, I don't want to drag.
No, I'm
everything that I did want to. There were a few things I wanted to make sure. I know since Steve isn't here, I wanted to share about some interesting stuff that we had in Noir City magazine.
Yeah, tell me. I've got the covers ready
for number 6, which is the one about Detour, the remakes of Detour.
No, right, not this one.
Yes, that one. That's the
okay.
One. So, in that issue, Steve got a copy of Edgar Ulmer's. Edgar Ulmer wrote a remake of Detour set in 1969 in the counterculture.
Wow.
So takes place in LA. It takes place hippies and the counterculture. It's really a fascinating, strange read. But it's Detour. It's that story. So if anybody wants to get glimpses of that, Steve, writes about it. We feature, snippets and excerpts from the script. And Steve actually talked to Ulmer's daughter, and she gave her insights about that script. And then in that issue, I don't know if anybody knows that in the 1990s, there was a remake of Detour that was made.
I vaguely remember that. I don't remember who was in it.
Wayne Williams, guy named Wayne Williams directed it. Not the Wayne Williams who was the Atlanta child murderer, but the guy he's the same guy who owned the rights to all of Ed Wood's movies. For a long time, Ed Wood's movies were owned by this guy. He had the rights to them, but he had the rights. He owned the rights to Detour, and he filmed. It's not a very good movie, but it's from the 90s. It's a straight remake of Detour in the 90s, and the woman who starred in it, Steve tracked her down. Her name is Leah Lavish. Great name.
Oh, great name.
So he interviewed her. She is now a clinical psychologist. So he did an interview with her. And you know who starred opposite of her? Who starred in it? Tom Neal's son.
Whose son?
Tom Neal's son. Tom Neal, who was the star.
Of of course, the star of Detour. You see, and I didn't remember.
His son plays the lead in this.
Wow.
He's not very good, but
it's interesting though. Yeah,
it's a fascinating curiosity piece. I don't think a lot of people know that, and so that issue is available at. We have our website noircitymag.com, and all of the issues of Noir City are available there for $5.99 each. Of course, it's an e-magazine, so people.
But beautifully laid. Honestly, and I know, Mike, this is what you do, but seriously, looks so amazing on a tablet. All of the stuff that you do.
John, you're doing the right thing. You're reading it on a tablet. That's how you have to read it.
It's amazing. No, it is. It's beautiful, and I feel that way as well. And we'll talk about Ringside Seat in a little bit. And you'll forgive me because I do want to talk about these other covers you provided, but I also see comments. And I don't want to miss some things that people.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So, because I want to involve everybody. He says Burt Reynolds reminds me of Shatner. Nick Meyer pushed Shatner in Star Trek 2. Look at the great performance we got. I agree with that. Goldie Hawn.
want to say that that Wrath of Khan for me, and you and I are going to talk about Star Trek, classic Star Trek down the road, but Wrath of Khan is the best.
Of course.
All the movies, and Nicholas Meyer is such a great director, and it's because of him. I mean, all due credit to all the actors in it, but I love Nicholas Meyer.
Well, and also the way that they were able. I love Robert Wise. Robert Wise is an incredible director, and that was.
But the first film is not a very good movie.
No, and it was a beast, and they had already. We might have even talked about this before, Mike, but you probably know they were locked into that opening date of early December of '79, come hell or high water, and they literally had to rush to paste the movie together and get the film cans to the studio.
The special effects weren't even finished for that film when it went up. They weren't even done. They had to they re-released it with the special effects finished not that long ago.
Yep. Well, and there was literally a multi-million-dollar penalty that the theater owners could hit Paramount with if they didn't hit that day. And it was really stupid to saddle a director with that kind of responsibility. Oh, yeah. And that's why I'm glad in the early 2000s, they got back with Wise and did a director's cut. Mm-hmm. That is a superior product and a little redemption. But no, Nick Meyer in Wrath of Khan, that's the reason why we got another several decades of Star Trek, because that saved the franchise. It really did.
And down the road, we need to talk about the sequel to Wise's movie that never got made, that Harlan Ellison was going to write.
Oh, I didn't know about that. We absolutely have to talk
we'll talk about that later, and because it's what a trip that was going to be.
Wow, that's cool.
What a story that was going to be.
Interesting. Now Brad says Overboard is that one movie which the guinea pig for new formats. I don't get it. I don't know what you mean by that comment, but all right, you said it. So maybe you want to explain it.
The Goldie Hawn movie.
Yeah, okay. I liked Overboard. I thought it was a cute comedy. I know they remade it with Anna Faris, and I forget who the guy was.
Very forgettable.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was going to say when you mentioned the Detour remake. There was that period in the 90s, like we got the DOA remake with Meg Ryan and Dennis Quaid.
Oh, yeah, it was horrible.
Yeah. You know what I did like, and it really gets panned. Maybe I just saw it in the right circumstances when I saw it in the theater, but a neo-noir with Woody Harrelson, Palmetto.
Oh, that's a good movie. Yeah, I
like that too.
I like that.
Every time I see it rated, it's always rated poorly.
No one talks about that movie. I haven't seen it since it came out, so it's been a long time. But
yeah, I thought it was a reasonable atmospheric modern noir.
I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah.
When we're talking about remakes, while I'm thinking about this, Noir City, I'm trying to think of what issue it is. It may be issue 7. I'm not sure, but my buddy Vince Keenan, who is now the editor-in-chief of Noir City magazine, he wrote one of my favorite articles in Noir City, all about the great remakes. All the noir remakes, not the great remakes, but just the remakes of the great film noirs. Like you were talking about DOA, Kiss of Death, so if anybody's interested, if you go to the noircitymags.com site, it's actually the issue. It's really worth getting to read that article. It's the issue where I did like a half and half, one half, the Kiss of Death, the original Kiss of Death.
Victor Mature.
I did what's his name?
Widmark or
Richard Widmark, and who played him in the
was it a Cage? Was it Nicolas Cage?
I did a half page, like a half and half, like a Two-Face. Like I did a Two-Face cover with the two of them, and it says
awesome.
It says remakes on the front of it. So I really highly recommend anybody to get that, because that article that Vince wrote is really great.
I liked Night in the City. I like both the original Widmark one, and I like the De Niro Jessica Lange one. I thought that was good.
Yeah, Vince talks about that too.
My buddy Burt Sugar in that movie.
Burt Sugar's
in the remake. Yeah. Burt made a handful of cameos in various films, and he was very proud to be in the Night in the City remake, because he was just. I mean, Burt couldn't help it with the fedora and the double-breasted suit. I mean, he was. And the way Eddie dresses, to
And the cigar too.
And of course the cigar, absolutely. I mean, so yeah, he really was like there to, be atmospheric in Night in the City. And he was always very proud of that, that he was part of that production. I mean, he was in a lot of crappy movies as well, unfortunately, like Rocky V and Great White Hype. And isn't that disappointing? Because Peter Berg is such an exceptional director.
Yeah,
and that movie is just,
yeah.
I hate it. I
He's
hate it.
a boxing fan too. He's such a big.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, it's like there's a guy who truly does love boxing, and it's like his boxing movie, not that good. Now, I liked Ron Shelton's movie that he made with Antonio Banderas and Woody Harrelson as kind of the two low-level fighters that are friends and have to fight. And Lolita Davidovich is in it as well. Yeah. I can't remember the name of it right now, but I thought that was a good boxing movie.
Yeah,
of recent vintage.
I guess the other thing that I gave you a cover for was Steve wrote an article about, when Steve comes on again, he can elaborate more about this.
Sure.
He wrote about the noir stories in EC's that would be the Picto-Fiction one. That one. Yeah. So EC Comics, when the Comics Code came around, their answer to get around the code, because they were putting out there was pre-trend, new trend, all the great stuff in new trend, Weird Science, Tales from the Crypt and so forth.
Yeah, Tales from the Crypt.
Then post-trend was all their stuff that was approved by the Comics Code. They're kind of like neutered, stories.
Stories from the Bible.
Well, actually, that's pre-trend.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
That's pre-trend. So post-trend is like Psychoanalysis, Valor.
Valor, yes.
Valor is very good, actually.
Yeah, a lot of good Al Williamson art in Valor.
Beautiful Wally Wood stuff, man. Some of Wally's stuff in that, and Williamson too, man. Unbelievable. I had the EC library, but anyways, what ended up happening was that Mad was able to be saved because it turned into a magazine, so it avoided the Comics Code.
Yep.
So they created a line of stories that were going to be in magazine form that were almost like graphic novels before they were graphic novels. So there's no word balloons. It's like sequential art with text in them. And I'm gonna go get the EC Comics library that Russ Cochran put out of Picto-Fiction, which I worked on. I was able to design.
Yes, indeed. I'm glad you're bringing it up. I wanted to talk about that, and I want to name check a prototype original graphic novel there you go. Look at that. Wow. Wow.
Anyway, so these were like the most highly sought out things. And when Russ when Russ ended up doing these, it was the last thing he had to do. He went through, the entire run, and I worked for Russ for about 10 years. So
wow.
He went through the entire run of all the ECs, reprinting them and shooting directly from, he got into, he was friends with William Gaines, so he was able to shoot directly from the art. So all this stuff is in black and white with color covers, but it took Russ years to get to this stuff. And I think we were talking about this the last time when I was on your show. We were talking about ordering his stuff out of the back of the comic book price guide. So as a teenager, I started buying his stuff. As a teenager, the Weird Science EC libraries, these bound editions, these beautiful bound editions. I would work my butt off, in construction, and I would spend my money to buy these bound editions, which I think at the time, if I remember, were about like $60 or $50, for a box set.
They're out of print, aren't they? Because
they're all out of print. In fact, before your show, I went on eBay to look for this, and I saw it in the price range for the EC Picto-Fiction is from about $100 to $200.
I understand.
That's
not that bad for an out-of-print book, and it's such a gigantic book.
Oh, it's huge. You're talking about like there's
shows how thick it is and everything.
There's four volumes in this thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Anyways, so what Steve did was he wrote a really great piece in that issue that you put up, the cover that you showed, about the noir stories, because they did crime and they did some horror stuff, and all the great artists are in there. You know, you got Graham Ingalls, you know, Jack Davis did work.
Did Matt Baker do one of them? Because
I don't think Matt Baker.
okay,
may have done a story at some point for EC, but I'm not familiar with Matt Baker doing anything for EC.
because I wasn't either. Dark Horse released a late, I believe either late 40s or early 50s crime all in one volume graphic novel, essentially a precursor to, everyone argues, Contract with God from Eisner. That's the first graphic novel. No, it's not. Gil Kane's His Name is Savage and Black Mark. That's the first graphic novel.
Franco's Chandler it's also,
Yes.
That's
yes.
awesome.
They're all in the conversation, but this was something from either the very late 40s or the early 50s, and it was called either It Rhymes with Dust or It Rhymes with Lust.
I know what you're talking about, and there is a good argument for that definitely being the first graphic novel.
Yeah.
I know people will come down on me about that, but I think there is a strong argument for that being the first ever graphic novel.
Oh yeah, I read the reprint, and it's a great story. It is like a 64-page done in one, and it was interesting. Eddie featured Muller on TCM. I want to say it was Underworld USA or something to that. It was definitely a Dan Durea led film where it also had a comic book as well as the film.
Well, the Lipstick Killer has
Go on.
The Lipstick Killer. The Lipstick Killer. He's inspired by comics, and he's actually reading a.
Well, that I remember.
Right.
Yes, with Drew Barrymore's father, right?
Barrymore Jr. is the killer, and he's reading Tales from the Crypt in that. You can actually see Tales from the Crypt in that. That particular episode was like I was able to do my contribution to Noir Alley because Eddie called me up and he said, I need ECs. I need EC comics. I need to be able to show them on.
That's great. Yeah.
He said, you need to send me your ECs. And I said, okay. He said, get down to FedEx, ship it overnight. You got to ship it to TCM. And sure enough, those ECs that Eddie's showing on the screen were my ECs.
Wow. That's awesome. That's amazing. But no, I'm thinking of a different movie. It's either the Underworld Story or Underworld USA, and Eddie actually held up, or they cut to a slide with the comic book there.
Underworld Story actually there was a great comic book adaptation.
Then that's what I'm thinking of. Yes,
I actually used that when we did an issue that was dedicated to Dan Duryea. I think that's issue number 9.
He's the best. I love that guy.
And we had like an expose article about his life, and then the writers took each of the movies that they wanted to talk about, and they wrote about the different movies. And I can't remember which writer wrote about Underworld Story, but I was able to find the copy of the Underworld comic book, which is a really cool comic book. It's really got some really good art in it.
Yes,
and it's a really nice straight adaptation. But I wanted people to see.
Yeah, here I'll isolate you again. Hold on one second. Here we go. Oh, there we go. Come on, there we go.
So here's what these pages look like.
Wow.
So they are like graphic novels.
Yes.
It is almost like a graphic novel. It's sequential, but there's no word balloons in it. And they've got these beautiful painted covers. I'm going to try to find one of the covers.
Sure.
But anyway, Steve wrote a really nice article of highlighting the noir stories that are in here. And there's some really good horror stories in there. Frazetta, his one of his last things that he did for comics, an interior for comics, was an unfinished piece, and that's in this. Russ reprinted that straight from Frazetta's original pages.
Wow.
So he never actually finished the story. But the covers, you've got these really.
Look at that. That's beautiful. My God.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Cool covers. So being able to work on this was like a dream come true for me, being a teenager and buying this stuff from Russ when I was a teenager and collecting them all, and then being able to finally work on them. I loved it. But if you can find the Pictofiction, it's only available. It's never been reprinted in any other way. only this. I don't know if it ever will be printed. Maybe Dark Horse will get around to doing it. I know that Dark Horse right now is reprinting, doing the EC archives. But we did the Steve's article. So all of Steve's stuff actually has appeared in the Noir City annuals. I don't know if anybody. I'm going to get Noir City.
Sure. I was hoping when you isolate your camera that it would zoom in a little bit, because that's usually what happens when we're on a laptop versus a tablet. But that's okay.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there you go.
So
That's beautiful.
People are probably familiar with these. So yeah, we do the Noir City annuals. Eddie picks the stories, the best stories from the e-magazine, and we end up printing these and publishing them. So they're books as opposed to the e-magazine.
Oh, that's great. So yeah, for everybody, the stuff that Mike is showing, you can go to Amazon, or if you've got a great crime bookseller.
The thing is that they're all out of print except the most recent one.
Oh wow. Okay.
So
get the digitals.
Right. So you can go to noircitymag.com to get the original stuff. If you want to pay some money, these books are now going from anywhere from like 180 to $100.
That's awesome, man.
But there is talk. Maybe we'll at one point do like a reprint of like some of the best stories and reprint them in book form or something like that.
I'm glad that the magazines are doing so well, man, because I miss a really deep magazine rack, and we had so many great. They were in brick and mortar buildings, but they were technically newsstands. We had one in Evanston, right by Northwestern University, right off the L stop. And I used to live right by it. And I would go and get my favorite British magazines and my favorite French magazines of film and great literary journals. And it was, and all the great foreign newspapers from around the world.
Oh, yeah. John, I lived, and my buddy who's watching this, Greg, who's watching this, who I grew up with, and we bought comic books together. There was a newsstand that I went to in Miami, and it had everything. I went there every week, and those guys were like my good friends. They were like family practically, and they saved stuff for me. I mean, they would end up. I'd get Film Comment. They saved Film Comment. I'd get Famous Monsters. I'd get Eerie. That's how I discovered Will Eisner's The Spirit, was the Warren Spirit. Those reprints.
Yes.
They had the color section in them, and Richard Corbin colored the color section, and he colored the covers. And
amazing.
Doc Savage paperbacks. Shadow paperbacks.
Shadow paperbacks. The Avenger.
Yeah, and sports cards. I bought all my football and baseball cards there. Out of town newspapers. I mean, I was able to. I was a Yankees fan and a New York Jets fan, so I could pick up a Daily News, and read about my favorite teams in the Daily News. Nobody, unless you experience the newsstand and what a wonderful place that could be, and comic books, of course.
Sure.
The spinner rack, the comic book spinner rack. So you had all of these things, all of these amazing ephemera, and comic books. It was like, for me, that's how I grew up. I loved it.
No, and I agree with A. Johnson, who says he misses magazines so much he's been buying back issues of comics journals. That's interesting. I've been doing that a bit with Amazing Heroes, also printed by Fantagraphics.
Hey, when we were young, I mean, Amazing Heroes came out twice a week. It came out every 2 weeks.
Oh, I didn't remember. Wow, twice monthly? Yeah, that's interesting.
Yep, it came out every 2 weeks.
I've forgotten that.
Yeah, that was in the early 80s.
Yeah. Well, Kurt Busiek would contribute to it. Mark Waid was a contributing writer-editor for it.
Yeah. Great stuff. And the Comics Journal, the old Comics Journal, before they started putting their nose up in the air at mainstream comics and shitting on mainstream comics. I'm not nothing against Fantagraphics, because they put out some amazing books. I mean, I'm the biggest,
No, and even
the biggest Dan Clowes fan there is, but I just don't like what Comics Journal kind of became, but the early Comics Journal, from the 70s, the late 70s into the 80s, I had a subscription. I love that magazine.
my great regret is that I didn't have Tom Spurgeon on more before he passed away just a couple of years ago. I still can't believe he's gone. And we'd have great conversations at conventions. And I really appreciated his writing for years. And then when I got to meet him and know him, and also that he liked what I did, really meant a lot. Like, that was a great compliment, because my ambition was to capture those kinds of interviews that Comics Journal and Amazing Heroes would do. And I'm able to do that because I try to get out of the way of the guest and let them speak. And that's been the kindest compliment for people who remember Amazing Heroes at Comics Journal. David Anthony Kraft's Comics Interview.
Comics Interview was another great magazine. I had a subscription to that. That was fantastic. Magazines like that, Comics Interview, I remember like some of the special issues that they did. They did a special Frank Miller issue. I remember when Batman, the Keaton Batman came out, and they did a special issue about Batman, and they just that was the 50th anniversary of Batman. So they did a great job with that. Watchmen, also some of the special stuff that Watchmen did for Amazing Heroes, Comics Journal, and for Comics Interview.
Yeah, and I agree with Michael here, who says he read a Bernie Wrightson interview from the early 80s, and his demeanor was much more raw than later interviews. Exactly, man. I mean, that's the thing. You got these creators at that moment, what they were thinking about their current products at that moment. And they were just these great, like, very candid, God, there were, as in Comics Journal even, there were creator wars going on in the letter pages and stuff like that.
Oh,
Mike
yeah.
Fleischer and Harlan Ellison
Harlan
famously.
Ellison, which is infamous. Yeah, that was just, that was insane. I got to interview, thanks to working for Russ, because I designed Comic Book Marketplace for him, which was a magazine. I don't know if you remember Comic Book Marketplace magazine.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So I got to interview. I go and interview Neil Adams, which ended up being part of my book. I got to interview on the phone Bernie Wrightson. I got to interview on the phone Alex Ross, and I got to interview on the phone Will Eisner, which ended up being Will Eisner's last interview.
Wow.
Because he died like a month later.
2005 or 6, as I recall.
Right. So, what was really cool with talking to Eisner was being Jewish. I was able to kind of like talk to him. I wanted to talk to him about being a Jew in New York in that industry and what he dealt with, and how he brought, his background and his feelings about things to comics, not only what he was doing with the Spirit, but also what he was doing with his graphic novels that came afterwards. And also I wanted to talk to him about the movies. I always really wanted to talk to him about how much movies influenced him, which they did. They were incredible influence on him.
Oh yeah. It's funny. I did this great, I had, do you know about Cameo, and that you can get celebrities to kind of give people birthday wishes or whatever.
Yeah. Yes.
And I don't know if you saw my Jamie Farr one that we had done for my other podcast, the Oh Yeah podcast. I don't know if you saw it.
I didn't see that. No.
Well, I'm going to show it right now, actually,
Okay.
because it's only 2 minutes long. He was such a sweetheart to do this. And we asked him to, for our Oh Yeah podcast, we love MASH. We love Jamie Farr. We love his career as a character actor before and after MASH. And thank God, Franco of Art and Franco and Tiny Titans fame asked Farr if first of all, if Klinger would have had a favorite superhero. And thankfully, Jamie Farr is a massive comic book fan going back to the golden age.
Wow.
And he talks about it here. Now, do you have earbuds in? Because it might echo if we play this.
I do not, and I can't because I got to keep my iPad.
All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mute your microphone while this is playing.
Okay.
So I'm going to do that right now. And here is Jamie Farr, everybody. If you didn't see it on the Oh Yeah podcast. But check out this amazing section of him talking about his love of comics.
Hi, yeah, podcast host. This is Jamie Farr from the TV series MASH. And Yoko Chips wanted me to say hi to all the guys. And I got their names here: Art, Franco, Scoot, and of course Yoko Chips, Mike, and the other Mike. And they had a question. They said, who was Klinger's favorite comic book and superhero? Well, I believe you have me confused with Radar. As a matter of fact, I just emailed Gary Berghoff, who played Radar, and he told me that his favorite comic book actually was Wiz Comics, and his favorite character was Captain Marvel. But you got the right guy, Jamie Farr, because I love comic books. I had a whole bunch of. I had the first Superman and the first Detective Comics that introduced Batman. As a matter of fact, at one of the conventions, I met Bob Kane, and he did a rendering of Batman for me. And I can't find it, otherwise I'd show it to you. But look at here's some of the collections I have. My wife got me this one here. And of course, it has all the great characters in there, the Spectre and Hawkman and Plastic Man. And of course, here's the great comics. I used to enjoy those. I get the New York Mirror and the Chicago Tribune. They get all the comic characters. And I wanted to tell you, I had all the originals. They were absolutely pristine. And when I got drafted into the Army, I had them all put in my mom's garage in a nice big barrel. And guess what? When I got out, she had given them all away. I could have retired. I didn't have to do MASH. I had all these wonderful, absolutely beautiful comic books that I had, and I loved them so much. And Scoot, I guess you're from Toledo, and you like Tony Pacos, so I have a picture of that. So listen, guys, I like podcasts. I'll check in with you. Jeff Maxwell, who played Igor, has MASH Matters, which is a podcast on about MASH, and of course Alan Alda has one called Clear and Vivid. So nice talking to all of you, and I'm looking forward to listening to your podcast. Thank you.
So there you go. Oh, hold on. I'm gonna unmute. There, I'm gonna unmute you. 1 second. There we go, Mike.
Yeah, that was great.
Wasn't that delightful?
Yeah, and he held up the Jules Pfeiffer book, which I had as a kid. So many people had that book. That was their kind of like introduction to Golden Age comics.
100%.
For the people our age, that was our introduction to Golden Age comics, along with the Superman from the 30s to the 70s, Batman from the 30s to the 70s, so those books. That story he's told about his comics, almost identical to my father's. My father went into the Navy. He was 17 years old. He enlisted into the Navy in World War II. He was a comic book collector. That's how I got into. It was his influence that got me into comics. He had Detective 27. He had Action Number 1. He had the first Superman. He had all those comics, and he went off to war in the Pacific. And his mother gave all the comics away to the paper drive, to the old paper drive.
Right. No, it's a very famous story for all those comic book fans of the 40s. And yeah, man, hey, they had those paper drives for a reason. No, the war effort needed paper, and they were 10-cent little bullshit magazines. Who would have ever thought that they'd become such treasures?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so that's why all that stuff is worth so much money, because it's so rare. That's why comics nowadays are they ever really going to be worth that much money, because they're not that rare. Everybody saves their comics now, right? Nobody throws their comics out. Anybody who's a comic book collector saves their comics. All those moms who threw out their comics or made their kids sell their comics or trade their comics or give them away, made all that stuff so scarce,
Absolutely. And if you want further proof of Jamie's love of comics, there is a Mike Douglas clip from 1977. And the format of the Mike Douglas afternoon talk show was...
Oh, I watched it.
Well, I'm saying this for the younger... Mike, I know exactly. This is why we're friends, Mike. We know all this stuff. But yeah, for younger fans, they they would have a celebrity guest host for the entire week. And one of the episodes, it's listed as Wendy Pinney, the ElfQuest co-creator, as Red Sonja. So if you do Wendy Pinney, Mike Douglas, you'll find it on YouTube. But really, she only shows up at the very end of the segment. And Phil Suling, who really helped create the direct market,
the New York Comic Con. I mean,
and the New York Comic Con, he has a stack of. He's a guest on the show. He has a stack of Golden Age comics. Jamie Farr goes nuts and name checks Bullet Man from Fawcett and a lot of other, just like he was doing in the video, mentioning Hawkman and the Spectre, let alone Superman and Batman and the like. And it's so great because he is really, really excited. Jerry Lester, the old comedian from Broadway Open House, is also on the panel, is almost making fun of Jamie's love of all this stuff. And Mike Douglas kind of is teasing him too. But Jamie Farr was unflappable. And as we said about Eisner getting influence from film, Farr is like, hey, Hitchcock would use comic books to inform his storyboarding and, for films.
Oh, sure. I mean,
so
he wasn't the only one, I mean, there were a lot of directors. I mean, Truffaut was influenced, by Hitchcock, and he was also influenced by comic books.
Orson Welles, of course.
But Fellini too. Fellini wrote the introduction to Jim Steranko's History of Comics.
I love that memory, and I forget who had it, of Fellini visiting the Marvel offices and being so excited to meet Stan Lee. And isn't that amazing that Fellini was excited to meet Stan Lee?
I remember as a kid when Stan Lee was the guest host, and Stan Lee came on, and he came on in a Captain America outfit. And he came on and he said, "I'm not wearing the mask." And he says, "I'm telling you why I'm not wearing the mask, because the winged ears fell off, and I will not come on." I just remember it as a kid because it just made such an impression on me.
Me too.
Without it looking right. If Captain America doesn't look right, I'm not wearing this. So that's why I'm not wearing the Captain America mask.
And also, and I don't know if you remember, in addition to him dressing up, Douglas had like kind of a weird, almost Batman outfit on, but they had George Carlin was on, and he was in the Spider-Man outfit, and he made the joke. He's like, the spider, and then he points to his crotch. He goes, and the fly, And also, Joan Rivers was on as Wonder Woman, and I suspect that they gave her the onesie bathing suit costume, but she had the cape, the red cape that Wonder Woman would wear, totally covering her. And I'm sure she's like, yeah, I'm not going to wear that. But it was amazing. And also that Captain America uniform, Jonathan Frakes, Will Riker on Next Generation, in the 70s was a working actor in New York, and he was their go-to live-action Captain America, and they'd send him out for public appearances.
Yeah, they did. I mean, Marvel, they had Spider-Man and Captain America do a lot of appearances around New York. I remember in a lot of events. Like, Marvel had their own convention too,
Oh, yeah. They Frakes was at an Orlando, Florida convention, the FX Con. My friend Mark Hammond got me to this convention, and it was such a great, for 2 years in a row, the celebrities and the comic book people were all in the same area. There was no barriers, and we got to really hang out with them and talk to them. And my God, Peter Graves was there. And by the end of the weekend, we were on first name basis. And I would call Mr. Graves, but he's like, "Good morning, John. How are you?" And I'm like, "Well, Jim Phelps is talking to me. This is amazing."
Yeah.
And but also, oh God, now I'm blanking. All the Hollywood celebrities were just fantastic. But what was I just saying regarding the old Mike Douglas stuff and everything? Well, regardless, it was a great experience, and I can't believe my brain is
stuff. You don't get as much anymore.
Oh, I know what it was. Go ahead.
I wish if Steve was here, we could talk a little more about how we went to the Famous Monsters convention. That when they started up Famous Monsters again, and Forrest Ackerman was there, Ray Harryhausen, Ray Brad.
Yes.
Richard Matheson, John.
Wow.
So Steve and I got to have, breakfast with all those guys. And we were at that convention. It may have been the second one where we had breakfast with John Landis, which was really a lot of fun. Talking to him, I mean, talk about a guy who's like loves classic horror movies.
And great story.
Great and a great storyteller. Exactly. We just sat and listened to him and talked to him. And what was really strange was about a year after that, he put out a pilot for a TV series. Pretty bad. The pilot was pretty bad, but it was called The Kronenberg Chronicles, with a scientist named Dr. Julius Kronenberg, and it's spelled like our name,
Oh, funny.
KRG. It was like, did he take our name and use our name? I mean, it's like, you know.
That's awesome. All right, I remember now because I was talking about Frakes. So I meet Frakes at this FX con, and we're hanging out at the bar, and it was me and Jim McCann, who was the publicity guy at Marvel at the time, and Jonathan Hickman was down there. And he's thrilled to meet all these guys that were working for Marvel. And he's telling us about when he would do these public appearances as Captain America. And there was a summertime in the 70s Blood, Sweat, and Tears concert. And you know how the rock bands will have their writer that, okay, we need red velvet chairs in the dressing room. They sound like extravagant requests, but they put weird things in. Like Van Halen was famous for saying, we want M&Ms, but you got to take all the brown M&Ms out. And essentially it was to make sure that the venue that the concert was held at would read the entire writer and take their sound check information or equipment seriously. Mm-hmm. And so if the crazy bullshit stuff wasn't done, it's like, well, then you didn't read all the writer. Right. And they nail them on that.
Right.
And so Blood, Sweat, and Tears wanted Marvel characters in their green room backstage. And it was Frakes as Captain America and the guy who played Spider-Man for Marvel. And it was like balls hot, I guess, because it was in the middle of summertime, like 90 degrees and even worse backstage. And they were just sweating balls in those Marvel costumes. So the band is like, hey, man, if you want to take the mask off, it's okay. So Frakes took the mask off. I wonder if that's why the wings fell off when Stan had it. But Spider-Man would not break character, and he would suck beers through his mask. Never took his mask off and lifted it up for his lips and everything. And yeah, we're crying laughing at these stories. Frakes could not have been sweeter. And it was such, I mean, it really, we're just like, wow, we're hanging out at 10 Forward with Commander Riker. This is amazing. So that was a great comic book show highlight. And like I said, and like you said, yeah, it's so great when the conventions are a little more relaxed and you get to meet the celebrities. Yeah. That's my friend Mitch Halpern, Mitch Halleck, who does Terrificon in Connecticut. That's the kind of show he runs. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we got to meet Henry Winkler and so many. I mean, Billy D. Williams and so many great celebrities in the last few years. Because it's like, no, you guys, you're all equal guests.
Well,
there's no barriers.
You know, like I said, I wish Steve was here because we could talk about, because this was a shared event. We went to a Chiller Theater con, you know, that was in Secaucus, that used to have in Secaucus.
Yep.
I premiered our Shock Theater book at that Secaucus convention when we were had a Monsters from the Vault table. And we were just hanging out, and Fred Williamson, I may have told this story on your show before, like Fred Williamson was sitting at his table. Nobody was talking to him. I was like, man, no one's talking to Fred Williamson. I gotta talk to Fred Williamson. And I said, and I'm going to surprise him. I'm not going to talk to him about his movies. I'm going to talk to him about football. So
that's awesome.
What I did was I sat down and I talked for about almost an hour with Fred Williamson about his days in the AFL with the Kansas City Chiefs.
With the Chiefs, absolutely.
Intercepting Joe Namath and running it back for a touchdown, and how he got really angry, and he started talking about, I was the one who wore white shoes before Joe Namath wore white shoes. It was me, you know. And then Gloria Hendrick is sitting over there from Black Caesar. She's sitting next to him, and my brother goes over and he's sitting there, and he's wow. a half-hour conversation with her.
Wow, she was lovely. My God, so beautiful. And that's the thing, man. Those 70s blaxploitation movies, and a lot of times they were made by Melvin Van Peebles and people like that.
Oh yeah, Steve wrote a piece in not this most recent Noir City, but the Noir City before, or which is actually up for sale on noircitymag.com. It's issue 2028, and he did a whole piece on Black Caesar.
That's
great. Talked about the music, the great James Brown soundtrack, so yeah, we got blaxploitation into Noir City magazine. So
I understand. Well, they're great crime movies. I was watching Hammer, his with Fred's boxing movie.
Right.
And that's a terrific blaxploitation movie.
It is. And he was an entrepreneur as far as like the movies go. He was a producer, director, writer. I mean, he did the whole thing. He was the auteur of those movies.
He lives in the surrounding Chicago area. I'm not sure specifically what suburb or if he is in the city or not. And I think, again, when we talked about Fred in the past, I told you I met him a couple times at fights. And he was like, at first, like, all right, who the hell are you to bother me right now? But then when I knew his career, he mellowed out a little bit and he was a little kinder to me. A friend of mine who runs a lot of autograph shows pre-pandemic did a couple with Fred. And I'm like, we've got to rent a theater and let Fred show whatever movies he wants and do an evening with Fred Williamson. I really think it would be a great event. And sadly, I mean, he's only getting older, so I have no idea when we'll get out of this, if we could ever do it. But Amazon Prime not only has some of the classic 70s movies, but even those 90s movies after Original Gangsters, which, as you know, he was really the linchpin of getting that movie made.
And also he was doing stuff that was going direct to video. I mean, he was doing tons of movies that he was directing and producing that were going direct to video.
Yep. And that's what I'm talking about. Some of those 90s movies. Yep. God, Bubba Smith played like one of his police partners. Dak, and I know his first name was Dak. And Dak's such a great like action hero name, like Dak Rambo, of course, the horrible 70s actor from TV and film. Yeah. But I know Dak was his character's name, and they're fun. They're fun.
And I think I made because he was kind of intimidating. I mean, he was an intimidating guy.
Oh, he's a mountain of a man.
Yeah. So I think I did the right thing by like talking to him about something that he didn't expect to talk about, that he wanted to talk about, that nobody talks to him about.
Yep.
A lot of people don't talk to him about his football.
Well, and to be honest, I think I provide that opportunity for Word Balloon listeners when they meet creators at conventions. And I mean, this creator never said this, but essentially it's like, oh, when I'm not drawing, I like to make ships in a bottle. And it's like, you're going to get that one fan. It's like, hey, I like doing that too. And then while they're getting their comic book signed, they actually get to have a nice conversation with the creator because of some non-comic book tidbit that they reveal on Word Balloon. And I love that. And I think again, it only makes them more relatable to us all, and that they're nerds like we are.
And and it's also a surprise. I was, considering that, I'm so into all the classic horror movies. I never realized that Peter Cushing collected and painted and created toy soldiers, and he recreated great battles with like toy soldiers, and he would actually paint them. And I saw this kind of like, not a documentary, but I guess it was a news piece, a BBC news piece from the like late 50s, showing him doing this in his garage, and it's amazing stuff. And he had like all laid out on the floor, all these great toy soldiers. And it's like, that was not something that I even thought about Peter Cushing, or that would know that he would have done. But what a great thing to sit there and talk to him about.
From Marquette, Al, was it Al? Not Al Shepston. What the hell was his name?
Marquette, the basketball court.
Yeah. Al.
God, I can't think. I know Al. It'll come to me. I know who you're talking about.
He was really into toy soldiers.
Oh yeah.
And in fact, my good friend Dave Marin, who was a Wisconsin sports writer and sports editor in Kenosha, Wisconsin for years, had an interview with him. And at the end of the interview, he just out of nowhere goes, if you ever run into old soldiers, toy soldiers, not G.I. Joe, I'm talking about the battle recreations and that. I love that stuff. So if you ever hear, he goes, I know this sounds crazy, but I tell everyone I know that I'm always looking for more. So please, if you hear of anything. And he's like, all right, I'll go. No problem, coach. I'll let you know if I hear of anything.
Great. That's great.
No, it's amazing. Speaking of Cushing and Hammer, I noticed on Amazon Prime, they had and it's weird because sometimes the release date that they show on screen isn't when it was made. But there's this incredible over 2-hour documentary about the entire history of Hammer films, pre-Monster and post-Monster.
Yeah, that is. Do you know the name of it? Because there's a number of them. There's one that's really good, and
I just sent it to Gabe Hardman, and I'm going to tell you in a second.
The guy.
It's called Flesh and Blood.
I know
the Hammer Heritage of Horror.
I know the guy who directed that. He actually he wrote for Monsters from the Vault.
My God, that's amazing.
That's the best documentary about Hammer, without a doubt. I mean, hands down. In fact, when we had the FanX, I don't even know if you had ever heard of FanX, the FanX monster conventions that used to go on in Baltimore.
Okay.
So, we were a part of those, and we did the debut of that movie was at FanX, and he was there. I can't think of the director's name right now.
And Cushing and Christopher Lee narrate the film.
Yes. I never got to meet Peter Cushing, but I got to meet Christopher Lee.
Wow.
I got to meet him at a FanX.
Wow.
Because the guy who ran the FanX, Gary Spala, who ran the FanX convention, republished his autobiography, Lee's autobiography, Tall, Dark, and Gruesome. And so I got to meet Cushing. I mean, I got to meet Christopher Lee and sign my book. And there were like all these rules for all of us who were going to get the signature. It was like, don't talk to him. He's not going to personalize it. He'll just sign it. Just leave, get out of his way.
Right.
I was with my son, who would tag along to all these horror conventions with us. And he was, like 6 years old. And he had those wooden Brio Thomas trains. He was obsessed with trains. And Christopher Lee didn't talk to anyone. Who did he end up talking? Talk to my son. He talked to my son about trains.
That's great.
You love trains.
That's beautiful.
So here's Christopher Lee, and he's sitting there talking to my son about trains. He don't want to talk to anybody about horror movies or the movies that he's in, but he wants to talk about trains.
Again, that's these kind of weird things like that. So are you still in touch with that director?
No, I'm not.
Okay, because I'm actually, and then also,
But
I've got a little something brewing for October. I don't want to reveal yet, but I have a feeling you and Steve will be involved, and
I can get to him. Because the guy who I worked on a movie recently. I designed the titles for a Christmas movie for a director who was a friend of mine that Shout Factory released.
That's great.
And
not Hills Run Red, is it?
No, it's not a horror. It's not horror related.
Okay.
I'm going to get it because I'm going to promote it.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's great, man.
More promotion.
Get it. Okay. No problem. We'll talk amongst ourselves in the meantime. People obviously loving Jonathan Frakes.
So I got to design the movie poster.
Oh yeah, yes, I've seen you tweet about Feast of the Seven Fishes. Sure.
So, anyways, my buddy Robert Tennell, who's the director of that, he directed Surf Nazis Must Die. If you've ever heard of that movie,
absolutely.
Bob wrote that. So Bob's a good friend.
Lloyd Kaufman trauma movie, absolutely.
Yeah. So Bob's a good friend, and Bob knows him. Bob knows the director.
Oh, okay.
So I think it would be great. I would if you'd ever be interested. Maybe we could get Steve, Bob, and the director of Flesh and Blood, and we could come on your show and just sit and talk classic.
Well, yeah. I mean, we'll when we wrap up, we'll talk more about this off the air. I don't want to tip the hand yet, but it certainly is in the milieu of what we're doing tonight and what we'd hope to do with Steve. And another potential guest to talk about Hammer in particular, Paul Cornell, the great comic book writer and television writer of Doctor Who and many other British shows. He was doing a Hammer podcast and going back and rewatching everything, starting with Quatermass and
Oh
you know,
yeah, that
doing
yeah,
the whole history.
I'll have to look into that. Another person that's involved with Hammer, who has been involved with Hammer almost his entire life, is Richard Clemenson, who puts out the magazine Little Shop of Horrors, which is a magazine that is dedicated to horror, is dedicated to Hammer horror. It's a fantastic magazine. He's been doing it since the 70s.
Wow.
And he traveled. He went to Hammer Studios. I actually went to Bray Studios. When we went to London, I was able to take a tour. I told them, "Oh, I'm a correspondent for Monsters from the Vault magazine," and I said, "Can I come to Bray Studios?" And they said, "Oh yeah, come in, sign in." And they gave me the run of the place.
Wow.
They filmed Captain Scarlet at Bray Studios and all those great, great British TV.
Yes, I love that Jerry Anderson documentary as well about super animation.
Yeah, so a lot of that stuff was shot at Bray. But Bray, of course, was, all the great classic Brides of Dracula, Curse of Frankenstein, Horror of Dracula, were all filmed at Bray. And the hotel that's right next to, that's adjacent to Bray Studios, too. So it was great to be able to tour there. But Dick Clemenson, who I was talking about, was in the 70s. He actually went there as a guest of Michael Carreras, who ran Hammer. And so he's been doing his magazine since that time. He's been
wow.
Kind of a labor of love that he's been doing, and he continues to do it.
Do you know anybody, Mike, from the Film Facts magazine?
Yes, yeah, Gary Rhodes writes for Film Facts, and I designed his books on Bela Lugosi.
Was he the one that you were trying to put me in touch with?
Yes, Gary. Yes, I'm doing a new one of his.
That's great.
Which is all about Lugosi's career in Europe on the stage, all of his stuff that leads up to Dracula on the stage. So it's all about Lugosi's career as an actor, as a young actor on the stage, and then it will end with talking about him being on the Broadway stage doing Dracula. But I've done 4 books by Gary about various aspects of Lugosi's life, whether
we were trying to connect to do something like Monogram 9.
Gary would be great.
And he schedules just didn't work out. So no, he's another guy that would be interesting to get back. Like I said, we'll talk when we wrap up. Are you is it getting too late for you?
No.
Okay, good. Excellent. Because I still want to talk a little boxing before we're done. But
we can talk forever.
Absolutely. Well, no, I'd say, man, you came to the right place, as you know. So
I wanted to make sure that people heard about. I wanted to also promote, if I could, just because I think the Film Noir Foundation, because of the pandemic, the Noir City festivals, film festivals have been put on hold, like everything.
Sure. I'm sure that's a big moneymaker for you guys too.
The biggest moneymaker is the one that's in San Francisco that Eddie hosts. Eddie hosts all of them, but that one that runs for 10 days is the really big one, and that's at the that's the really big. That's the one where I got to become friends. Steve and I became friends with Peggy Cummins. When she was a guest when we showed Gun Crazy, but. The satellite shows help make money, definitely, and it's a big promotion. It's a great promotion for the foundation. But with those being out, the best way for people to help the foundation is to donate. If you donate, and it's tax deductible, you donate $20 or more to the foundation. It's filmnoirfoundation.org. And on the website there, you'll see where the links are. And you can make your donation. You get on their on their list. There's a few steps that you need to do, but you will have a subscription. It's like almost a lifetime subscription to Noir City Magazine. So you will get those issues, and they will be sent to you via email to download each issue, and that's a great way to support. The Film Noir Foundation, who does these restorations of these great films. We put a number of them out on DVD and Blu-ray. But we to help pay for that stuff and to keep the Film Noir Foundation alive and going. And you get a great magazine. I think, I'm biased, but I think it's some of the best writing in movies in that. And the new issue, I think I sent you the cover for that. That's David Mamet. The Film Noir Foundation gives annually, they give an award to the modern noir master, and David Mamet was the guy, yes, who won the award this year. And Eddie conducts a really great interview. Eddie Muller conducts a great interview with David Mamet in there, and then Vince Keenan, who's the editor of the magazine, he gathered a lot of the writers along with himself who wrote some really great pieces about Mamet's career. There's a piece about him as a screenwriter, as a playwright, and then his individual movies that he's directed. About Glengarry Glen Ross, and also
House of Cards.
House of Cards. That's a great issue. Inside that issue, also Steve wrote a really nice piece about the movie Frailty, which is kind of like a under the radar movie. Not a lot of people know about that movie. If people are interested and they want to get a great magazine, it is an e-magazine. And help the foundation, that's a great thing to do. And it's tax deductible.
I put the URL in the chat. However, unfortunately, I hit / instead of for .org. Everyone can obviously fix that on their own and do that. But no, it's a beautiful magazine, like I said, and you do a great job, Mike, in terms of laying it out, and it looks incredible on a tablet. Yeah, I love it. And also, I noticed on that cover, you also have an article about Walter Hill. And I may have mentioned that when he made Undisputed, 20 years ago, I had the chance to interview him for Sporting News Radio, and we did a lovely and it's on my Word Balloon feed. It's amazing, and he was a pleasure to talk to, and we mostly focused on the movie, and I only got to talk to him for about 15 minutes, but it was still great to speak to him. And I'm such a fan of him as a filmmaker, and I think a fascinating writer and fascinating director. So
that's a really good article too. Really excellent article.
Steve, I'm glad you mentioned this from the fandom. The broadcast sideband channel Movies with an exclamation point runs a lot of film noir. Yes, in fact, our good friend Hilary Barta, that's how he gets the majority of his noir viewing these days, because he cut the cord but got a digital antenna. And it's one of those.
You were telling me about when I was on the show with Will. You were telling. I wasn't aware of movies. The movies.
It's a great channel. I was checking out their schedule for tonight, and in prime time they were running Jailhouse Rock, and I forget what movie they were running prior to that. But no, they're amazing, and it was funny. I guess they do it on every Wednesday instead of it being Hump Day. It's Humph Day, meaning Bogart. And yeah, they had Dark Passage and Don't Bother to Knock. Is that the right title?
Yeah, with Marilyn Monroe, right? And
yes.
That's a good movie.
Oh man, no, it's a really great channel, and there's commercials obviously, and again, they're free, so that's good. But the great thing is they're run uncut, and when a movie ends at an odd time, they'll slip in. I forget the name of the syndicated show, but they do profiles of great Hollywood stars. The Decades channel runs the full half-hour version of it, but they'll run things like that, or like whatever movies came out in 1937, they'll show all the trailers and things like that. So it really is for a free commercial movie channel. Really great in terms of its library. And they go heavy on noir on Sundays and Thursdays in particular.
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, it's amazing. And really, they do westerns. They do the Bomba jungle movies, and
those are great.
Everything.
Great. Those are great.
I can't recommend it enough.
Amazon Prime has a lot of the really good. They have the classic stuff and a lot of the good B stuff also.
Absolutely.
I'm really impressed with all the stuff that Amazon Prime has.
And again, Tubi does too. Tubi does a really good job of obscure documentaries as well. A lot of foreign product, along with those movies that Mike and I grew up with in the 80s that were on Cinemax and bad TNA comedies
Yeah,
of the day. They're all there too.
That's
so
great. I'll have
yeah.
to look into. I have to look into that channel. I have to definitely look into that channel.
Well, and it's interesting because I noticed. I mean, I did a review of the first animated episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, and it had been a few weeks since I had looked at CBS All Access, and I think now that the dust has settled and they have remerged with Paramount, they're expanding their programming there and their movies. It's still not very deep as far as old Paramount movies, and that I find incredibly disappointing. And I don't even know if maybe the library got picked up by another film company or distributor, and there's some sort of barrier. Yeah, and also I know too that maybe to digitize them for streaming, maybe that's a long time-consuming process.
That is an incredibly complicated thing, and it's something that Eddie has to address constantly, because there's so many people that are making requests for movies him to show on Noir Alley, and there's stuff that's just out of his control because of legal aspects. It could be anything from, the music for a film is tied up. There's legal stuff tied up in the music or in the original story that the movie is based on. There's all these movies that they're always at, Devil Thumbs a Ride is always a movie that everybody wants to see on Noir Alley. And it's like, legally, it's like impossible for him to go ahead and show it as much as he'd want to show it. He's shown it at the North festivals. But, showing it on TV, there's so many legal entanglements of that stuff. It's one of the reasons that the Film Noir Foundation restores movies that are not tied to studios, because, there was a big, there were a lot of people who were saying, oh, why don't you, restore this classic noir or this classic noir? And it's, his feeling is like, well, why would I do that? I'm doing the work that a movie studio should do. They should be doing that, and I'm not going to own the rights to the movie, This way, when we do the movies that we have done, which is like Woman on the Run, Too Late for Tears, those are movies that, the foundation ends up having and able to put it out on Blu-ray and DVD.
That's awesome. And, my conversations with Svengoolie were informative that way too. And the people that syndicate MeTV also syndicate this movies channel. And they will make a group licensing deal for 6 months or the year, and it covers all their movie channel properties. And there are movies also shows movies from the 80s, 90s, and even 2000s. But yeah, like all of a sudden, they'll look at the library and be like, oh, here's a great old, Bird Eye Gordon movie. Okay, great. We'll run it this year on Svengoolie.
Right.
But yeah, a lot of that is limited to whatever they license for the year. And yeah, Svengoolie has that same issue where people will request movies, and he's like, "Yeah, I can't do it right. We can't do it right now, or we'll probably have it again in a year or two, but just not right now."
Kind of, the rights thing, and it can be just so frustrating because I know that I think we may have been talking about this off camera last time. We were talking about the television series, The Name of the Game, that I loved as a kid. And it was like one of the reasons I think I got into, I wanted to get into publication, Shout Factory was all set to go ahead and release, start releasing The Name of the Game. I mean, they were going to release the first season, and it ended up that they couldn't do it because of the rights issues with the soundtrack, with the music that was in it. And that was like 5-6 years ago. And with the demand that's out there for these classic things to even stream, because Shout Factory has a streaming as their
yes.
You'd think that they'd be able to, they'd do it if they could, but obviously they can't, and that's how the legal stuff is just so tied up in so much red tape.
Back to The Odd Couple, I noticed because I have CBS All Access to get Star Trek, and as a bonus, they have Taxi. Although it's interesting. They have the first 4 seasons of Taxi that were on ABC. They don't have that 5th season that made it to NBC, and gave them a chance to get to enough episodes for syndication. But regarding The Odd Couple, the final season, half of the episodes aren't on there, and it's all because of music rights. And in fact, Decades ran an Odd Couple binge last weekend. And I'm like, oh, that's an episode where Felix has his little jazz combo, the Sophisticados, and they're playing songs that were hits in the 30s and 40s. They're not public domain, and there's no streaming agreement to air them. They can air on over-the-air TV,
right?
But they can't stream. And it's fascinating because, yeah, man, I'm like, why are there only 12
and there are
final season episodes of The Odd Couple?
And I've talked to Eddie about this a lot, and it's like, and his answer is, it's like, CBS doesn't care, Universal doesn't care, Paramount doesn't care. This stuff doesn't make money for them. They are not interested in going in with their lawyers and trying to untangle this stuff, getting the rights. They don't give a crap. This doesn't mean this isn't going to make them any money, so they don't care. Well, and it could be changed, it could be cleared up, but they don't care.
Well, and that's why so many of like Anchor Bay and some of these other smaller DVD companies, it is worth it to them to do a limited run of a movie that was a big studio movie, but like you said, the studios don't care about them anymore. And I'm hoping too that as physical media disappears, that streamers will emerge. And like we said, man, Amazon does a really good job, and I'm glad they're doing it. But I do hope that Shout Factory and some of these other streamers survive to run that kind of limited appeal video.
Yeah,
I hope so.
I think that Shout Factory, their product as far as their Blu-ray goes, I mean, incredible stuff. I mean, what they did with John Carpenter for The Thing and Escape from New York and Assault on Precinct 13, all three which I recently bought. I'd hate to see physical media, go away, because it's great to be able to pop into your player, and you get all the extras. You get the director commentary. I mean, right now I've been binging the Criterion Bruce Lee collection, which is, and I just finished Matthew Polly's fantastic biography of Bruce Lee. So I'm like obsessed about Bruce Lee right now, and you're not going to find that really streaming. I mean, granted, Criterion could put on their Criterion channel, they could put on these, and they're beautiful restorations of Fist of Fury and Big Boss and, Enter the Dragon. But you're not going to get all the extras that they have in there. It's amazing. It's endless. It's 7 discs. 2 of the discs are just supplemental stuff, which is just extra stuff. I mean, so for somebody who really loves Bruce Lee and is really into Bruce Lee, they're going to really, really enjoy it.
All right, I have to show you. I'm going to stop my camera for a second. Now, it shouldn't take me long, but I'm going to reach over and grab something that I recently purchased that you might find interesting. Hold on. One second, everybody. Sorry, because my earbuds just popped out too. All right, getting the camera back on. There we go. My one vice during the pandemic that I've totally gone into face first, and I make no apologies. I was a big Corgi car fan as a kid.
Sure.
Of course we were, because again, same era, and they're really expensive. And to try, especially to find the vintage ones, I did allow myself to buy an Aston Martin DB5 from GoldenEye that was $50, and I'm glad I got that, and I make no regrets. But what I have done for a lot of like-minded things that are cheaper, and again, and it's so funny because some of the fans responded. I talked about it on a couple of the other podcasts, and they're like, "Oh, if you're into," I've been getting Hot Wheels size old toy cars, but nothing collectible as far as rarity or anything like that. It's like, no, I want a '66 Batmobile because I loved my Corgi Batmobile. What do you got in yours? There you go.
My original '66 Batmobile as a kid, I saved it.
That's outstanding. I had, yep. Oh, that's great, man. Yeah. And I had the We had the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang car. We had the Aston
Bang.
Martin.
The
We had
Aston
little.
Martin, the greatest. The Aston
We had
Martin.
Little Nell.
Oh yeah, little Nelly.
One-man helicopter from
Yep.
You Only Live Twice.
Yep. Little Nelly, and then there's also the Green Hornet's Black Beauty. Oh, that's what you're going to show me.
Well, yeah. And now here we go, and I'll isolate myself for a second.
Nice.
So this is not. It's so funny. Again, I'm having this weird effect. Somebody told me what filter I could take off to have that work. But essentially, this is from Vietnam. Now it has. You can see gold machine guns, which I think is a movie effect. I don't remember from the Bruce Lee show. There were not on the Green were not gold machine guns on. Yeah, definitely not gold, but I don't even remember machine guns. I think that almost would likely be almost too violent for that show. But the design, it's the closest thing I've been able to find to the classic Black Beauty design. And it was only $20.
Oh, that's nice.
And it came from Vietnam, which cracked me up as well.
That's great. I remember that car because I had that car. I saved the Batmobile. I saved my Batmobile. I still have my Aston Martin, which is put away. I don't have that nearby. But
understood. The
Black Beauty, I remember Van Williams is hanging out of the car with the gun, pointing the gun out the window, and Bruce Lee is driving. That's my memory. And it had a satellite in the back. You press the button, and the yellow satellite would spin out from the trunk. I remember that car. I love that.
And that wonderful turntable garage where his regular sedan.
Yeah, right.
Britt Reed was driving around in, that Kato was driving around in as well. And then they would hit the switch, and it was like a turntable.
Yep.
And the Black Beauty was like anchored underneath it and flip over. And oh my God.
Those Corgi cars were great. I mean, they had the rubber tires on them because, I as a kid, I collected Matchbox and I collected Hot Wheels.
Yes.
And all of they had plastic wheels, but the Corgi, man, they had
rubber
tires.
And die-cast metal. I mean, there was nothing cheap about those cars. And yeah, man, anytime my father would take a trip, that would be my toy, like coming back and stuff. And oh my God, we had, between me and my first cousins, we had so many, and we just adored them. And man, we beat the hell out of them. I mean, we'd put them in sandboxes. They're toys. I mean, it's so funny. Half of me wants to unbox them and really hold them because they're not rare. And I know they're not rare. And that's okay. Because again, I want to hold them. I want to enjoy them.
They were meant to be held. They were meant to be taken out of the box. I mean, I just.
Yes. So I got a Johnny Dynamite is an excellent company that reproduces classic.
They're not around anymore, are they?
They are, and
okay.
And I got
models. They were redoing the Aurora models, if I remember. Too.
Oh, that's amazing, and that doesn't surprise me. But I got a Steve McQueen
Bullet car.
Yeah, a bullet car. The great design of the Mustang. Yeah. I even got. I'm not a big fan of the movie. It's okay, but I got a Gone in 60 Seconds Mustang as well.
That's cool.
So one's a 67 Mustang and the other's a 68 Mustang, and they're different. Yeah, exactly. See, Michael's like, take them out of the box. Yes, absolutely, man. No, I agree. Oh, and A. Johnson regarding Green Hornet opinion of the Gondry film, disappointing would be my answer. Unfortunately,
the Gondry film. I don't even.
Well, I'm assuming that he means and I didn't know the name of the director, but I'm assuming he means the Seth Rogen Green Hornet movie. I know.
I didn't even bother.
Although the guy who played Kato was very credible, and it bummed me out because I really think with a little tweaking and a more serious director, it would have been fun to kind of see a bumbling Britt Reed that wasn't as broadly Seth Rogen comedy. And I like Seth Rogen comedies.
I like Seth Rogen too, but I just was not going to be into Seth Rogen kind of like, making fun of the Green Hornet.
Yeah, and it's
not that the Green Hornet was anything that special for me as a kid. I mean, I liked the show. But
I like the show a lot. I'll be honest, he really was one of my favorite superheroes. Yeah.
But I mean, it didn't even last that long.
Unfortunately, one season.
Yeah, and they played it straight. We talked about this before. I'm not. Even though I have this Batmobile, and I love the show as a kid, I'm not a big fan of the '66 Batman TV series. But the Green Hornet played it straight. And reading Matthew Polly's book about Bruce Lee, it was really interesting about how Bruce Lee had to fight to even get lines. In that, they wanted to, even though he got that break and he got that shot, they wanted to, an Asian guy, an Asian actor, they were just going to relegate him to just being,
Yeah, boss. Yes, boss.
Yeah, the chauffeur. I mean, that's why he ended up having to, to leave Hollywood and leave the country. Couldn't get any work, and that's, of course, it's the story of his fame and how he became a star in Hong Kong.
I love that cameo. Michael mentions, he says Last Dragon. Actually, that's the El DeBarge fun Hong Kong movie that they made. But Dragon, the Bruce Lee story, for being kind of a, yeah, I like it. I think it's very credible, and Jason Scott Lee does an excellent job. But I love that sequence where they show the Green Hornet being filmed, and Van Williams actually plays the director of that sequence.
Right. Yeah, he does a cameo. He does a nice cameo there.
Yeah, and it's amazing. It's a great. You're right. The whole, pardon me as I stretch because I'm fat. That whole sequence is got a little cramp. Got it. And again, boy, sitting around too much doing podcasts, not exercising enough. Shame on me. No, it's the whole. You're right. The whole Bruce Lee story, and then what he had to fight for in Green Hornet is amazing.
Yeah, but Kung Fu, was his story. That was his whole thing, and they took it away. They ended up doing what he didn't want them to do, and what Sterling Silliphant, who was his friend, who was the script writer, who tried to do as much as he could for Bruce Lee. He was actually one of Bruce Lee's students, along with Steve McQueen and James Hobo.
I didn't know he studied. That's amazing that Silliphant was one of those guys too.
Yeah, he studied with Bruce Lee. They ended up giving it to David Carradine. I mean, that was crushing for Bruce Lee. Anybody out there who is interested in Bruce Lee, I cannot recommend Matthew Polly's book enough. It's long; it's like 600 pages, but it really goes into detail. I mean, he did his homework and he did his research, and it's a pretty fascinating story, all the way through. And he has his theory, which is, I don't even think a theory about his death, about Bruce Lee's death. I'm buying into what Matthew Polly wrote about.
Did he think he was murdered?
No, that he. I don't know if I should give it away if people are going to read the book, but heat stroke.
Interesting.
Heat stroke. He had suffered. If we're going off on a tangent about Bruce Lee,
yeah, please.
I love Bruce Lee.
This fits. Scene missing, man. It's all Hollywood talk. It's all movie talk.
So, when all of Enter the Dragon was, they looped all of Enter the Dragon. All the dialogue is looped. So they dubbed all those guys redubbed their lines for it. And it's interesting because I didn't realize that until I read the book, and then when I watched it, I actually watched it last night for the first time on the Criterion, and I noticed it. I was looking for it, and it was like, yeah, it's not that noticeable unless you really are looking. But if you're really looking, you realize, yeah, they're dubbing their lines. So Lee was doing it over at Raymond Chow in Hong Kong, in Raymond Chow's
studio.
Yeah, his studio. There was no air conditioning. It was horrible heat, and it was like 100 degrees in there, and he actually collapsed and blacked out, and he had swelling of his brain. He had to be taken to the hospital. They thought he was going to die. He was vomiting. And Matthew Polly goes into all of the symptoms of heat stroke, and it was like Lee had all of them during that.
Wow.
They thought he was going to die, and they actually called his wife, and they rushed him to the hospital. It was headache, vomiting. He collapsed, swelling of the brain. Garbled speech. He was in the hospital. They wanted him to stay in the hospital longer, and Bruce Lee, being the workaholic and guy he was like, I've got to continue working out. I've got to do more. I'm on the binge of becoming this great superstar. He released himself from the hospital, and what he was actually going to do was he was still working himself death, and he attributed it to what happened to him was fatigue, the classic fatigue. I collapsed from fatigue, but it wasn't. It was heat stroke.
Wow, that's amazing.
And what doctors have said is that you can have the long-term effects of heat stroke, and it can happen to you again. You're more likely for it to happen to you again. And what ended up happening was he was working on Game of Death. He was going to start working on Game of Death again,
right?
After Dragon. And he had was working on the script. He was directing it, writing it, and what's his name? The actor who played James Bond in
Lazenby.
George Lazenby. He had George Lazenby. They cast George Lazenby in it. He was going to have George Lazenby in it.
Yes.
This into the story, and he was going to have dinner with him. And this was a horribly hot day in Hong Kong. Hardly anybody had air conditioning at that time in Hong Kong. And he collapsed again, and it was the same type of thing. And he was actually at the woman that he was having an affair with. He was at her place.
Oh, wow.
He said, I'm having a horrible headache. And what was happening was his brain was swelling. And he says, I need to lay down. And she gave him a pill that contained some aspirin and a couple of other things that should have been harmless for the headache. And he said, I'm going to sleep. And he went to sleep on her bed. And she just left him. She said, well, I should leave him. He doesn't feel well. He's nauseous and he wants to sleep. And she left him for hours. And he was supposed to have dinner with Lazenby and Raymond Chow, to discuss Game of Death.
Right.
And he missed the appointment. And Raymond Chow called her up, and he knew that Bruce Lee was there. And she said, well, I'll go try to wake him. She couldn't wake him.
Wow.
I think he's breathing. I can't wake him. He rushed over. Well, immediately they tried to cover it up, because it was like, oh my God, he's at, this woman's house, and he's supposed to be a happily married man, and, the tabloids in Hong Kong and so forth. But they called in a doctor, actually the doctor who treated him for the heat stroke before, and he came in and he was already gone. They tried to revive him. So he had already died when they brought him to the hospital.
Jesus.
So what Matthew Polly lays out is pretty damn convincing. The final verdict from the Hong Kong
autopsy.
Autopsy. The autopsy was like I think they said it was not natural causes, but I'm trying to think. I can't think of the wording, but it's like not overdose, not natural causes, kind of unknown, but what they came from the court proceeding that interviewed, it was like a 2-day court proceeding where they interviewed so many people, the doctors and experts and coroners and so forth, that it was the pill. He reacted to the pill. The brain swelling was from reacting like an effect from aspirin, like an allergic effect from aspirin. But what Matthew Polly did was talk to doctors that if you had an allergic reaction to aspirin, your throat would swell up, and your tongue would swell, and it would be almost like a bee sting, or people that eat shrimp. It's the same type of allergic.
Yes.
He didn't have any of that. He had swelling of the brain, and so anyway,
wow.
That was
heavy.
I was convinced when I read it, because I always thought it was an allergic reaction to the aspirin that you have.
That's so funny. Or not, that's not funny, excuse me. This is funny from Hisham Zubi, who says, I love all these tangents, but I think if John Evans ever stays up past 11 p.m. streaming, he should switch to Coast AM mode and just start talking about Area 51 and Bigfoot. Unlike Art Baltazar, Bigfoot does not fascinate me. Area 51 does fascinate me. I won't deny that. I will never, I'll tell you, George Bell and Art Bell and George, I forget the name of the guy who took over for Art Bell with Coast to Coast. We have on the line a man who claims to have come from the future in a time machine that he built himself. And
Well, it's John that that we have been going on. It was originally supposed to be about EC and about monster movies and corgis and Bruce
Bruce
Lee.
Lee.
Like this is
I love it.
the kind of conversation I want to have with somebody. Okay,
Mike, I'm telling you, ever since we started talking, I'm like, oh yeah, we're gonna do a lot of word balloons in the future. And no, it's my pleasure, man. I want to point out, because again, our love of boxing and Ringside Seat, which again is another excellent movie
yeah,
or magazine that you put together.
I'd like to be able to just do if I could just say that
I posted here it is.
our new issue is our first special issue. Ringside Seat, I kind of based the business model on the Film Noir Foundation, similar to what Noir City is. And that's from Eddie Muller, because, Eddie and Nigel Collins were two of the people who helped me get Ringside Seat started. And Bill Detloff, who you know and who you've had on your boxing show.
Yes, indeed.
Is the editor-in-chief, and Bill is the writer of the great Ezra Charles documentary. I mean, the Ezra Charles biography. And
Absolutely.
What's going to be a great biography on Matthew Saad Muhammad.
I'm excited to read that. Yeah.
And Bill was a longtime senior features writer for The Ring. He is the editor-in-chief. I mean, I may have started Ringside Seat, but Bill is.
I'll do that so we can see each other.
The content is Bill, and he's the one who came up. I wanted to do a special issue. I talked to him. I said, we should do a special issue now that, with fights being on the downside, not as many fights, let's do a special issue. And he came up with this idea: 21 best fights of the 21st century so far.
Right.
So what Bill did was get our writers, who are great. All our writers are fantastic. And they came up with their 1 to 21, the best fights of this century so far. And each of them took on about maybe 4 or 5 fights and wrote about those 4 or 5 fights. And so I've got it laid out from 21 all the way to 1, the number 1 best fight of the century. And like Noir City, it's a digital magazine, looks great on the tablet. You can read it on your computer also. You can read it on your phone if you can somehow read it on your phone.
Yeah, really, it's tiny, but yeah, it's there.
But we have links to the fights. So all of the fights have YouTube links. So as you're reading it, you can click on the photograph where there's a link, and you can actually watch the fight, and then read about some really excellent boxing writing. And so this new issue is, we're wrapping it up now. We have subscribers, and they get their issues first on Monday. It'll probably be out Monday to them. If you subscribe to Ringside Seat, you will get our annual book, similar to, I'm going to go get it, Noir City Annual.
Sure. I'm very excited to read this special issue. Being, because
description list, John.
I appreciate it, man. It's great. Yeah.
This is last year's.
Yes.
Book.
Yes.
So great. It's got tons of great.
Yeah, isn't that Monzon right there? That picture, that first picture, wasn't that Carlos Monzon?
And then we've got Eddie wrote a piece in this one. We've got new stuff. It ain't just old stuff. We've got new stuff too.
That's great.
So you get a free copy of our book if you're a subscriber, and you get your issues before anybody else. And then it's on sale through our website, ringsideseatmag.com. Probably sometime later in the week. You can buy it same way you would buy from noircitymag.com. So ringsideseatmag.com, and you can buy all our back issues. This is our 11th issue. So we're getting ready to wrap up our 3rd year of publication. I can't believe we've made it 3 years. There's really only 2 American boxing magazines in existence, and that's The Ring and Ringside Seat. And the ring, we are kind of together. You know, we work with each other. Doug Fisher's a really great guy, and
Doug has been on Word Balloon. I'm a big fan of Doug's.
yeah,
Absolutely.
Doug's a big comic book guy too.
Doug is a very big comic book fan. Absolutely. Actually, I've been thinking I should get Doug back on and everything. So
yeah, I'd love to come on. If you ever do, if Doug wants to do it, I'd love to come on with Doug, you know.
that'd be great. That'd be, and truly, because, you know, they're talking about Teofilio, and I forget his right. They're talking about Lomachenko and
Lomachenko and Teofimo Lopez.
Teofimo Lopez. Thank you. Yes,
that's going to happen. And that is the fight I'm really looking forward to. I mean, I cannot wait for that fight. Very
exciting fight, and a good matchup. A very good matchup.
Oh yeah, that's going to be really great.
That is not a gimme for Lomachenko. And I think he found and I'm sure you and I probably discussed this before, or Dougie and I did, in terms of he found his ceiling at 135. He shouldn't get any heavier.
Can't go any higher than that.
No.
In fact, I think he should probably stay at 130.
I agree. Well, he had a war. He won, but he had a war with Linares.
Yeah.
At 130.
Well, he got knocked down by Linares. Linares knocked him down. It was a flash knockdown, but he got knocked down by Linares.
Yep. To be honest, I mean, I really would have to think about my list of 21 best fights of the 21st century. That might be on there because I just thought it was such an exceptional and entertaining fight.
It was a very entertaining fight. I really enjoyed that fight. But you know, we work. I designed 2 issues of the ring.
That's great, man.
Asked me to go ahead and do a special issue on the 4 kings, which is
right, the four middleweight kings of the 80s.
Yeah, so I got to design. I got to design that, so that's pretty nice.
Absolutely, man. There they are.
I think it's sold out. I think that one's sold out. Then I got to design.
So good.
I got to design the Gotti Ward special.
Yes.
That we recently did. And what was nice was, you know, Nigel Collins, who used to be the editor-in-chief, he actually wrote an article. He wrote the main feature, the main feature for that Gotti Ward.
Oh, that's really great, man. You know, I tremendous respect for Nigel. When I get my shit together and I really start doing Big Bout more regularly and stuff, I'd love to have Nigel on. I think I told you I was so honored. Bernie Fernandez started following me on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, dude, thank you. That's really nice. And he's like, well, I checked out your feed. He goes, like-minded people should follow each other.
Yeah,
and I'm like, oh, that's really kind, man.
And Bernie follows me. He follows Ringside Seat. And Bernie wrote one.
Great Philadelphia boxing writer for people.
Oh, yeah. And Bernie wrote one of the pieces in the Gotti Ward ring.
Oh, that's great. That's terrific. No, he's and actually, did his book come out yet? Has his book come out?
I'm not sure.
I'm gonna have to pick that up, and I'm gonna have to check. You know, and Tom Hauser always does those great collections of his essays,
right.
And I'm a big fan of his books when they come out every year. And you know, along with buying my Hot Wheels that I've bought, and then Matchboxes and things like that are all reasonably priced. What I have been spending money on eBay is finding my old articles from Boxing Illustrated.
Oh, cool.
Because from 1990 to 94 or 5, I wrote a lot of articles and covered primarily what was happening here in Illinois. But I would go to Wisconsin, I'd go to Indiana, I'd go to Michigan, I'd go to Iowa. I covered my 2 biggest stories were a story about Tyson when he was convicted and serving time in Indianapolis. And the other one was when James Toney won the middleweight title from Michael Nunn.
Oh, great. And that's good.
Yeah, that was an amazing fight. I remember I was in the press section and I was screaming at the end, and all these people looked at me with disgust. I'm like, we got a story. I'm like, I'm not being a fanboy. I swear to God. I'm excited because we got a really exciting story because Michael Nunn had that fight in control, and James Toney late rounds just knocks him out.
Oh, that's great.
And becomes an incredible middleweight champion and even super middleweight champion.
Yeah. Absolutely. So yeah, you know, so it's you got 2 different ends. I mean, they're different magazines. The Ring and Ringside Seat are very different, you know. And it's nice that we coexist and we work with one another.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
And we had an ad in the Gotti Ward issue for Ringside Seat.
Oh, that's great.
And then the Ring has an ad in the new issue of Ringside Seat. So, you know, and like I said, you know, it's been a nice working relationship with Doug.
I'm glad, man, because I like you both, and I truly want you both to succeed. And I'm happy for Doug when he gets to broadcast for Golden Boy
Oh yeah, yeah.
and does a good job of analysis on camera and stuff. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, literally from 1990 till 2006, between print and broadcasting, those were my sweet spot years when I really covered the sport heavily. And Bert Sugar honored me, and I was on the ratings panel for the insert in Boxing Illustrated for the Budweiser ratings panel, which I loved. And he really, I again, it really meant a lot, much like I was saying about Tom Spurgeon. Bert's appreciation of my opinion and what I thought of fights and stuff like that, it really meant a lot to me.
He was one of the greats.
Yeah.
He was absolutely one of the greats.
Yeah.
But a number of his books on my bookshelf. So
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I miss him. 8 years. He's been gone for 8 years.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't know he was that sick. And thank God, within the last 6 months of his life, I did reach out to him and talk to him. And I even put those conversations on one of the episodes of Big Bout that I do. And I'm glad because he was man, he would be a guest on Scene Missing, because literally more so even than talking boxing, be like, all right, what are you seeing on Turner? What have you seen lately? And just was so delighted.
Nigel's a big movie fan.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, in fact, I had Nigel do his 5 favorite noirs for Noir City. He did his 5 favorite noirs for Noir City. And speaking of 5 favorite noirs, in the next issue of Noir City, after this one that's coming out, I'm interviewing Tom King and doing kind of a career interview about his life, which is fascinating, as you know.
Absolutely.
And then we're going to talk about Rorschach. And I'll also be talking to Jorge Linares because
great.
I'm not going to give anything away about Rorschach, but it has a definite tie to film noir.
Yep.
And Tom has written his 5 favorite noirs for the upcoming issue of Noir City, which is really interesting what he picked.
Well, and we were talking off the air, I think, about the recent graphic novel that Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips did, Pulp. Oh, yeah. And out of the blue, Ed emails me today, and he's like, hey, can we do another word balloon? I'm like, Ed, you could be on every week, and I would be very happy about that. He's like, okay, great. So if all goes well, we're talking Tuesday afternoon. It will be pre-recorded. Ed is camera shy, and the last thing I want to do is make any guest feel uncomfortable. And every now and then, there's that rare exception that doesn't want to do a live interview, unfortunately. And so I'm hoping that we will solicit questions through social media, through Facebook and Twitter.
Oh, I'm sure.
And I'm saying that for people that are watching and listening.
For Ed, you'll get a bunch, Yeah,
absolutely. Well, and I just, really, I want to give fans a chance to talk to Ed as well. So
yeah, that would be great.
But yeah, he's amazing, and Pulp is fantastic.
I'm such a big fan of Ed and Sean, and we did in Noir City number 14. We did a special comic book issue, and I was able to hook Eddie up with Ed and Sean, and he interviewed both of them, and that's a nice interview. And actually, I think Ed and Eddie did. I think a bookstore talk in San Francisco.
Oh, that's great.
It must have been about 5 years ago, I guess they did one. So yeah, if anybody's interested in the Noir City issue, we did a comics issue for number 14. Criminal is on the cover. It's a criminal cover. And Eddie wrote a really great piece about Will Eisner. And I did a piece about the 1970s Batman. We have a piece about Batman Year One in there. Eddie and I picked the 10 greatest noir comics ever. So you can get that on the website too.
That's excellent. We should put you in touch with Rucka to talk about crime.
And yeah, I'd love to. I love Greg's work. I mean, his, Gotham,
Gotham Central, yeah.
He and Ed working on that was just
and Mike Lark too. Yeah,
Mike Lark's artwork is fantastic. I love when Ed and Michael Lark did Daredevil. Fantastic.
And also on Gotham Central, what I loved about it too was it was during that transition time when some comics were still printed on newsrag rather than the slick paper that they are now published on.
Right.
And it was so appropriate for Gotham Central to be published on newsrag like that.
Yes. Yeah. It was hell on colorists. I'll tell you that, because
Absolutely.
my wife was the colorist for Catwoman during those days, and Catwoman when Ed Brubaker and Paul Galassi were doing it, and my wife was the colorist for Catwoman, and it was hell because your colors would look one way on the screen and then printed on that crappy paper.
Yeah, it literally was like trying to print colors on paper towels. Exactly. I understand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But getting back to Pulp, I love that. I love that. And I actually tweeted out about that I think Jeremiah Goldman is the new folk hero. I love that character. He was so great.
Now I'm looking forward to talking to Ed on Tuesday about Pulp and some of the other new projects that he and Sean have cooking.
Yeah, they had that new the graphic novels that they're going to release based on like the 1980s, kind of like paperback crime fiction that they're doing. I'm really excited. Anything that those guys do.
Absolutely, man. No, I completely agree, and it's always exciting. And Ed's, I just love Ed's enthusiasm about this stuff too. And literally, I just get out of the way and let Ed spin. It's like, go Ed. Yeah, I'm like, people want to hear you, man. And that's the wonderful compliment is, hey, man, isn't Word Balloon great? Did you hear that Ed Brubaker interview? And I'm like, I just said, how you doing, Ed? And I let him go. Right. Just like Ben is another guy like that.
For that comic book issue, Ed did his 5 favorite film noirs.
Great essays that not only he would do, but also his guest contributors at the back of Criminal.
Yeah, very good.
So good.
And just also Sean's illustrations for those. Great. I love his painting. I love his paintings for those.
And his DVD covers that he's done over the years too.
Yeah, he's been doing some great ones. The Night Stalker ones that he did, and he did the one I got was for the spaghetti western. Oh God, no, I can't think of the name of it. Django. He did for this beautiful
original,
beautiful box set of Django, and inside it comes with like lobby cards and all kinds of stuff. It's a beautiful restoration of Django, but Sean did this beautiful painting on the front cover of it. So yeah, that's great stuff. Dan Clovis also did a 5 favorites film for.
Oh, that's awesome.
And Dan has to be seen to be believed what he picked. He said because he's friends with Eddie, and he said I could pick Sunset Boulevard and
Gun Crazy, Detour, the classics.
Postman Always Rings Twice.
Sure.
Everybody picks those. He picked some crazy shit. He picked I think one of them was 30 Day Fiance, and it was just like insane stuff, but it was really fascinating. He did Dragnet. He did a couple of the Dragnets, like the 60s Dragnets,
the pilot for the revival, and then also the 50s. I know there was a Dragnet Jack Webb movie as well.
What he picked, I think these were the 60s. These were the ones in color.
Oh, but was it the episodes that he chose?
Yeah, I think the ones that they collected into a movie where they collected, like they did with like the Green Hornet, like they did that with the Green Hornet they released it like 2 episodes and they combined it like a movie.
Yeah, I think in the case of Dragnet, though, I do believe it was a pilot for the series.
There may have been, and
you're right, because there was more than one crime that they followed and everything. But yeah, it's well, and again, Gabe and I were talking about this last night on our Outer Limits talk. We went off on a tangent, and yeah, it's the 60s Dragnet is so like America needs a crew cut, and it needs one right now. That was really
right. And I mean, what Dan picked were just like this really bizarre He also picked like these crazy movies, like not even B grade. It was like Z grade movies. It's like, how did he find out about this movie and see this movie? So I can't recall offhand. If you go to noircitymag.com and you kind of look through, it's one of the later issues. It's after issue 11.
Okay.
And you can see in the TOC, it's worth buying just to get Dan Clowis's explanation as to why he picked those movies. It's pretty
That's
funny.
awesome, man. No, again, a lot of these independent movies or Poverty Row films are fascinating. Why they were made, how they were made, the fact that we only had 6 days to shoot this thing, so we made it. And again, this is why I love watching Eddie's show on the weekends on TCM. So, no, it'll be a thrill if Eddie decides to come on Word Balloon one night. It'll be great to talk to him, and I, of course, want to talk to him not only about his love of comics and film, but also about his father and the great boxing writer that he was.
Oh yeah, and Ringside Seat is thrilled that in our second issue, which is available on the website, Eddie writes a really great piece about his dad. It's a fantastic piece.
That's awesome. Yeah. No, again, being here in Chicago and getting to see some of these guys that were tied to boxing, from the 40s and 50s and stuff, and their last go-arounds in the 90s when they were still around and stuff. It was a pleasure to meet them and having a great lunch with Ernie Terrell, the great heavyweight fighter of the 60s and 70s, whose sister replaced Diana Ross in the Supremes. And I haven't had a hit.
He was a promoter, wasn't he, for like music? He was a music promoter, wasn't he?
Yeah, and then he was a fight promoter as well. And very infamously, early in ESPN's life as a national network, Top Rank did a card in Chicago, and they had a 10-fight card, and every one of them was a first-round knockout. And so they literally had to fill like 90 minutes of a 2-hour block because they had no more fights. And they got and like Bob Arum never forgave Ernie for that and would bust his chops about it every time Bob was in town to promote a card. But yeah, Ernie was a really interesting guy. Yeah, and I mean other great fighters and our refs and judges and stuff. No, and again, my buddy Ben Bentley, the great Ben Bentley, who was a wonderful press. He was the press relations guy for the IBC, the International Boxing Club.
Sure.
And like I said, unfortunately, like he told me, he's like, John, my stories die with me. And I'm like, okay, it's all right, Ben. I'll get something from you. But yeah, he was great. They were a lot of fun. It was great to be around those guys. And again, Bert, good Lord, we had so much fun.
I hope you revive your boxing podcast.
I will, but I've told you off the air what I want to do with it, and I'm slowly assembling. I mean, for people who are listening, if you like Katrina Longworth, you must remember this. I would really like to take a look at the IBC's history from Joe Lewis's retirement to Sonny Liston, as far as the heavyweights go, but even all the other middleweight divisions or all the lighter weight divisions as well. I think it's a fascinating story. And I'm collecting my research. I'm collecting my mood music, my sound effects, because I would like to kind of cut to your kind of classic in the ring punches and things that you can hear and stuff, and have the bells go off and things. And no, I think there's so many interesting stories within the weight divisions and some tragic stories about some big names in boxing as well, and fixed fights and great fighters that took forever for them to get the legitimate decisions they deserved inside the ring. A guy like Carmen Basilio immediately comes to mind. I'll definitely want to talk to Bill about Ezra Charles and why am I blanking now? His manager, the great trainer. Shame on us.
Yeah, really.
They made that great Hands of Stone movie about Duran, and De Niro played the trainer.
Ray Arcel.
The great Ray Arcel. Absolutely. Man, there's a guy that I wish I would have had the opportunity to meet. But I met Archie Moore, which was great.
Oh, wow, that's
we
great.
got to have one conversation with Archie Moore. I met Gene Fulmer. Great that I got to meet Gene Fulmer, the great middleweight.
Sure.
Yeah. So, no, I mean, I do. I love boxing, and I will confess that I think I love boxing history more. I mean, I am always intrigued by what's going on in the game, but it's sometimes just the bullshit between the promoters gets in the way of us enjoying the sport.
Well, right now, that's the biggest problem in boxing is, this crossing the streams, this inability to cross the streams. I mean, you've got weight divisions that are loaded with talent, and they're mixed between Top Rank and PBC, and they're not, and Golden Boy, they're not getting along, and they fight one another. I mean, you talked about the Lopez Lomachenko fight. It's like that's a rare case of like they're both Top Rank guys, and they're going to be able to fight each other. But you know, somebody like Terrence Crawford, who's immensely talented, who's a great fighter, and there's nobody, he can't fight anybody. There's all these people in the welterweight division that he could be fighting, and it's like he can't fight him. And then, you know, PBC won't even mention in their broadcast Terrence Crawford. It's like like a curse word, you know. They won't even mention him. So you know,
and truly
very frustrating. It's very frustrating.
Well, and that's why truly we need the honest brokers of the magazines to kind of cut through the bullshit and talk about it. But even sometimes there's restrictions on how much some of these magazines can speak about it as well. So, you know, it's I'm saying
that Ringside Seed kind of tells it honestly. Bill is that kind of person who is going to be absolutely honest, bluntly honest about stuff. It's not going to probably get us, you know, interviews or press from Top Rank or any of the promoters, but we don't give a shit.
Right.
Not what it's about.
No,
I'm not saying that other people are doing that, but I'm just saying, you know, but I just don't, it just doesn't, none of it seems to make any difference. You know,
yes,
they want to make the fights that they want to make and make as much money as possible on these fighters and put pay-per-view fights on that shouldn't be even pay-per-view fights. You know,
yeah, it's in all professional sports where the broadcast arms are there to serve the local teams.
Yep.
But the fact that they are in a league and they have no choice but to play against each other, that's the difference.
Correct.
And whereas, like you said, these promoters have siloed themselves within their own universes. It's almost like Marvel and DC, where they don't exist. And thank God there was enough of a crack to allow Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury to fight each other.
Wilder and Fury, yeah. And it looks like maybe that we're going to get another Wilder Fury fight, and maybe a Fury Joshua fight, which is very hopeful. I mean, that, you know, that there you've got kind of the crossing of the streams too.
Yes.
So,
but it's too rare, and again,
very rare.
And I will say I am declaring this. This is my opinion. And in fact, I think most fight fans agree. Oscar De La Hoya as a promoter will never live down the "we need this fight to marinate" quote that he made about Pacquiao and Mayweather. And for those great fighters to miss that window of fighting each other in their primes is inexcusable.
And when it ended up happening, how it just, what it did to boxing in general, you know, it was horrible. I cannot tell you how many people who I spoke to who said, I want nothing to do with it.
I will never buy another pay-per-view because of that fight. And it was 5 years ago. And I mean, it's no single fight will kill a sport.
Of course,
but it's a death by 1,000 cuts sometimes.
Oh yeah, and you know, boxing's been
hemorrhaging.
Well, it's been going through a death for like 100 years. You know,
at least 30 years. I mean, literally since the 90s.
You know, people keep talking about boxing dying. It's not dying. It's not. No. Certainly not what.
But it's But it keeps getting marginalized.
Right, and you know that the problem is you know the promoters who are causing that. And then you've got, you know, what you were discussing before, which is, you know, the networks and the announcers who are just shilling fighters, you know, instead of like being reporters or
honest brokers. Yes.
Yeah. You know, they're sitting there shilling fighters, you know, and, you know, ESPN's doing it. It's like they're top ranked fighters, and it's like they're just shilling the fighters. And HBO did the same thing when HBO was around.
And that's the shame
with the PBC fighters.
Well, that's the shame because again, you go back 20 years ago and HBO in the 90s was an honest broker still.
It was, yes.
And then, but you're right. It eventually as it was winding down, became a house brand as well.
Yep.
And that's a shame because, God, I'll tell you, when my favorite moment, and I don't even know if it's on YouTube anywhere, but when they replayed the Tyson Douglas fight and they had Don King on, and it was not a comfortable interview for Don King.
Yeah.
And they treated it like real journalism. And, King was still trying to promote his guy, Tyson, even though he clearly lost, and said, oh, no, it was a quick count and all this bullshit. And it's just like, no, we all saw the evidence. The evidence was there, and HBO wasn't going to let him get away with double talk.
Right. No, I remember that, and you're absolutely right. But you don't have that. You don't have that
Nope.
anymore.
Nope.
And if there was maybe the networks could be the ones to go ahead and hold these places, hold these promoters down, but they want the money.
Exactly.
They want the money.
They're in business with the promoters. I mean, and they always were, but at least there was like this understanding of, we got to call it like we see it. You got to let us call it like we see it. I mean, and again, that's and also it's interesting. And this is another thing I want to talk about when I get back to the Big Bout podcast, and also the IBC era. That's really, I mean, television really was this magnifying glass that you couldn't, a fighter couldn't get jobbed as easily on TV as they could when it was just in a local arena and it was a newspaper coverage, and it might be a scandal for a week that, that middleweight got jobbed and really should have won that fight, but they're on to the next, group of stories and it falls away. But on television, when literally millions were watching, you couldn't escape it. And I think that's when the stink really probably started happening. And I think maybe, that's why the Senate hearings might have started and stuff, because I've bought a few books from the 50s of sports writers that really, there was a great writer in Minnesota. I don't have the book handy to name him, but he was talking about how television has really suddenly made the scrutiny even tighter on these guys can't get away with the fixed fights like they used to. And that's going to change the sport.
Yeah, sure. No, I agree with you. Look, it's part of the appeal in a way. It's kind of
sure.
Boxing is the noir of sports.
There's absolutely
no denying it. Its history is fascinating. I mean, people are fascinated with the history of baseball. I would argue that the history of boxing is just as or even more fascinating.
Oh, absolutely. I never felt more like a flinty newspaper man than I did when I covered boxing. Sure. And I would have my metaphorical trench coat and then fedora on. And I never had the guts to wear it like Bert did. But it was.
Yeah. And what we're missing is guys like Bert Sugar and Eddie's dad, who was so great on the West Coast, covering fights, and who would tell it like it is and write it. I mean, Eddie, a lot of that stuff came from his dad, of who he is and his thought process and philosophy about things, came, I know, from his dad.
Do you own that Barney Nagler book about the history of the IBC and the fall of the IBC?
I do not have that book.
It's, it's out there. It's rare, but it's under $100. The times that I've purchased it for myself and a good friend of mine who is also a boxing writer, I bought him a copy as well. They're under $100, and it's a really great book, and it's an orphan book. I don't know. That's, I think, why it's never been reprinted.
I think we were doing in Ringside Seat for the first maybe 5 issues or so. We had a column, 10 best boxing books, and we had Steve Farhood. Steve Farhood is a regular columnist now for us.
That's great, man. Boy, I haven't seen him in 30 years. Yeah.
Yeah, so Steve does. In the new issue, he does a column on the 10 best fights that never happened. But anyways, I think it was either him or I can't think of who it may have been, listed that book as one of the 10 best boxing books.
It's like a Jack Webb kind of reportage day by day of what happened and how they fell and how they were caught. It's a great story. And I certainly don't want to plagiarize from it, but it will be one of my big sources. And that's why I also want to kind of comb the old newspapers and get as many accounts as I can
Yeah.
of what happened. But yeah, no, it's fascinating. And really, I mean, Jim Norris of the NHL and Arthur Wirtz here in Chicago, they were the front businessmen, and Truman Gibson, a prominent black lawyer and businessman. They were the business frontmen. And meanwhile, all these fighters' contracts were with gangsters, and they had no choice but to work with these people.
Incredibly crooked, incredibly, it's just taking advantage of fighters. I mean, we could go on and on about
Oh yeah,
this. I mean, the stories that exist. It's part of the appeal of boxing, but it's also part of like why a lot of people
agreed.
Aren't fans of boxing because
absolutely,
how crooked it is.
Absolutely. And he passed away, so I don't feel bad. Well, I don't mean to speak ill of the dead, but first, I mean, I respected Cosell from stepping away from the sport because I think he was sincere when he just had enough. And he said, it's mud. It can never be clean. Unfortunately, and I want your opinion of both of these guys, Frank DeFord, who, was a great Sports Illustrated writer and editor, created the National, the daily sports newspaper of the early 90s.
I read the National. I regularly read the National.
Me too, man. It had great boxing coverage. Absolutely. I was very disappointed because he took the stand as well with Cosell that I'll never do sports or never do boxing again. And then all of a sudden in the late 90s, he started appearing on HBO fight cards. And I'm like, you're a hypocrite.
Yeah.
Because obviously they threw a lot of money at you and you said yes, but shame on you. Because I respect the people that the sport became far too corrupt for them to pay attention to it anymore. And I absolutely respect that. But that's really because, again, they would use the understandable argument of it being a blood sport. It is too dangerous, all those things. And I absolutely respect people who feel that way. And there is a small part of me that is, I wouldn't say ashamed, but it's almost like the football fans, especially now that we know about CTE and things like that. And concussions. And it's like, boxing suffers from a lot of that stuff too. In fact, when Ali passed away, as a quick tangent, I had suggested, and I said, I hope I don't offend any Muslims that might be listening, because that's the last thing I'd want to do. But given the amount of head trauma that Ali had, that it might be beneficial to do an autopsy on him, which would be against his religion. And I'm sure it didn't happen. But a good friend of mine who was a surgeon at Northwestern Hospital here in Chicago, I was dating his daughter at the time, and we were watching the Olympics and we were watching the boxing. And he's like, "You really like boxing, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I got to tell you, I've seen a CAT scan of Muhammad Ali's head." And he goes, the guy has suffered so much trauma. That's why he's got Parkinson's syndrome.
Oh yeah,
it's from all those shots to the head.
Yeah, the conclusion was that Parkinson's syndrome was from all the damage, all the.
But that's why, like I said, for DeFord to do the 180 and suddenly, boxing's back in the garden, and isn't it great? And I'm like, fuck you.
I think with guys like that, with guys like Cosell and maybe DeFord, as they're getting older and they see something like maybe, for example, what the Tex Cobb Holmes fight that he broadcast, and it was a terrible mismatch, and
Dooku Kim and Bobo Mancini.
Oh yeah,
around that same time, Aaron Pryor and Arguello.
Sure, it's a reactionary thing that we have as human beings watching this, and that sometimes it's just it gets to you, and you're like, I've had it, I think that it's hard to gauge what they were thinking entirely. Was it like this this reactionary moment of seeing something like this, and I'm fed up, I've had it, all of these things, I've finally had it. I mean, I know DeFord wasn't associated with boxing quite the way Cosell was, of course. I mean, Cosell kind of completely built his reputation on boxing.
But Ford would do like the Billy Conn profiles and things like that in Sports Illustrated.
He did that was a great piece.
Amazing piece
on Conn was Sports Illustrated, and the fact that Sports Illustrated also was one of the great I wanted Ringside Seat to be as much like Sports Illustrated was in the 70s and 80s. And
Pat Putnam, the great writer.
Pat Putnam, exactly. That I wanted Ringside Seat to be feature oriented, right? These kind of like features, and like Eddie said, it's all about the writing when we do Noir City. I mean, I take pride in my design work, but the writing is fantastic. And it's like it wouldn't exist without the great writing. And I wanted Ringside Seat to be something similar. And
Agreed.
the writing would be something that was really important and really good. But that said, what you're talking about, football, I mean, even and I've always been a football fan. I grew up a football fan. I love all sports. Football, baseball, and boxing were like, my go-to things growing up, and they still are. But I definitely went through a period where after what was done to Kaepernick and his treatment, and then all of that came out, and then in the CTE, I said, I can't watch anymore. Why am I watching this anymore? These guys are I'm watching football players that I admired as a kid and I grew up with as a kid, and look at them. They can't speak. They can't think anymore.
They're killing themselves. They're committing suicide.
They're dying.
Yeah.
And I felt terrible, and I said, I can't watch football anymore. Well, to be honest with you, I'm the hypocrite, because that ended. I couldn't help myself.
Yeah, but you're not. Yeah, but Mike, you're not.
I came back to watching football.
But you're not picking up a check, Mike. I mean, that's I understand. And again, we're conditioned because of the love of the game, as we all had growing up with it and everything. And I understand that with boxing as well. But that's the thing. I wouldn't even mind if DeFord had a change of heart and was watching fights again. Right. But to actually pick up a check after making such an important declaration. And that's why Cosell was an arrogant guy, and a lot of people had a lot of enemies. But I give him his integrity points of, no, I can't. And in fact, I even got to, on a call-in show, he was a guest on, Milt Rosenberg was a great radio host here in Chicago. Oh. He was a professor at the University of Chicago. Right. Brilliant man. And he had Cosell on with, when he came out with What's Wrong with Sports. And I had to ask him, and I got through, and I had to ask him what he thought of Holyfield as a champion. And I, being a novice, said he reminded me a lot of Floyd Patterson in terms of being a smaller heavyweight, having to compete with big guys. And he said, may I disagree with you, sir? To me, he reminds me of a young Ezzard Charles. And I'm like, I get it. And again, I'm happy to be schooled by the master. It was really, It was great that I got that observation. And again, he was paying attention, but he said, no, I'm not covering this sport anymore. I'm not broadcasting this sport anymore. Yeah. That's it.
I'm a Cosell fan. I love Cosell.
Me too.
Doing boxing. I loved him doing football. Granted, even in the NFL, when he was doing Monday Night Football towards the end, he was very bitter. And it came through, but he was still the best. He was still great,
and he was a legitimate intellectual too. And those great local shows that he would do, speaking of everything, and would have Hollywood people on and people from music and stuff. I mean, no, the guy was a brilliant man. He absolutely was.
I read a biography of him. That was an excellent biography. I can't remember the name of it. About maybe 10 years ago. And I've never seen those shows that you're talking about, but I read about them in his bio.
There's a couple clips on YouTube of some of those local shows. No, he was incredible. I'm a big Don Dunphy fan as well.
Yeah, Don Dunphy was great. I read his autobiography.
Me too. It was great. A lot of integrity, and again, a lot of it. And a great broadcaster. Amazing.
He was a great broadcaster. He kind of told it like it is during the fights. I'm like my favorite fight to watch that I try to watch at least once a year is Ali Frazier 1.
Sure.
Like greatest, in my opinion, it's the greatest sports spectacle ever. We'll never have anything like that again. And
the world stopped for that fight. Literally, the world stopped for that fight.
Exactly. And we'll never, and the people who were there and everybody who had to go and wanted to go, and, the whole story about Sinatra. I
have that Life magazine. I had to buy it.
I have it too. And it's funny, I posted for Ringside Seat on our Twitter account, I posted a photo that was not in the Life magazine that he took. It's a really good photo from the fight, and it like got all of these likes and retweets, and people were just fascinated by it because it's like Sinatra took the pictures, and
yeah, he was Life magazine's for people who don't know the story. He couldn't get a ticket for the fight, so he made a deal with Life magazine to be the photographer. Wasn't that the deal? That he wanted, essentially he just wanted to be a fan, and then because he couldn't get that, he
wanted to be there. And
he took beautiful pictures. I mean, he did a great job. It wasn't a bullshit job.
Neil Leifer is the one who gave him his tips about taking pictures.
The great Sports Illustrated photographer, absolutely.
Right. And the cover photo of that Life magazine is Sinatra's photo.
Yep.
It was just a great event. But Don Dunphy called it, and what was funny is that Burt Lancaster's doing the color along with Archie Moore.
He was the host of the broadcast.
Host, and it's like, I love Burt, but he ain't no boxing broadcaster. But,
no, and Jack Kent Cook, we had him on the Score of my sports station, and he talked about that. And he's like, "Look, it's a world event," and he goes, "I didn't mind."
I understood why he put him on there. I mean, he didn't ruin it. It's just it's just kind of funny to listen to his.
Oh, absolutely, no, and he's trying, but no, he clearly tried his element.
Tried very hard, but he's a little awkward. But Dunphy is great on that call.
Yeah, and there's so many great. Again, while we were suffering without boxing being on broadcasting and stuff for during the shutdown, I was watching more obscure. I was glad that ESPN ran those marathons of the classic fights as they did. I've seen those fights a million times.
Right.
I'm looking for Cornelius Bosa Edwards fights.
Sure.
I'm looking for Victor Galindez fights, and they're all on YouTube. Yeah. And also, I don't know if we ever talked about this, Mike. And next time I talk to Dougie, I want to ask him too. In my opinion, when the networks were running Saturday afternoon and Sunday boxing as they did,
yes, CBS and ABC, yep,
and ABC, all three, and to me, the best play-by-play guy, in my personal opinion, was Marv Alpert. The best analyst for NBC. The best analyst was Alex Wallow for ABC.
I loved Alex Wallow. He was fantastic. And of course, Alex Wallow went on to run the network.
He was the matchmaker for the network and everything, too. Did he run the entire sports division? Or
he was the president of the network.
Wow. Well, that doesn't surprise me. But the best team was Tim Ryan and Gil Clancy.
Tim Ryan and Gil Clancy were fantastic. Gil Clancy was honestly one of the best color guys. And yeah, Tim Ryan was fantastic. Yeah, see, okay, here we are, we're talking about announcers, and actually Jason Langendorf, one of our writers, wrote a really great piece in the latest issue of Ringside Seat number 10, right? And announcers, the announcers today, I'm sorry, I'm going to be critical, I'm not kissing anybody's ass, but they stink. They're horrible. I mean, my feeling about one in particular.
Yes.
But and I know how you feel about Max Kellerman too.
I'll cop to. Max Kellerman certainly knows the sport. I do not like his presentation. He is bombastic when he doesn't need to be. He's very nudgy to me, and I on the one hand, I'm glad he's doing a show on ESPN. I preferred when Dan Rafael was doing his show on ESPN Plus, and that was just a more no nonsense, straight up good journalism boxing show.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. And good Lord, the Showtime team is an embarrassment.
Yeah, I mean, you're just going to put it on mute. You're going to put it on mute. You're going to put Showtime on mute. You're going to put ESPN on mute. So
did you ever remember Bob Sheridan, who used to do all the Don King International? The Colonel. I got to interview him for Sporting News Radio. I couldn't find the interview, and it bums me out because it was a real pleasure. And he was a King House broadcaster. But that said, I do think he was a really good broadcaster of boxing.
Yeah. I mean, he was, he wasn't great, but I enjoyed. He was
entertaining.
Entertaining, and there's a feeling when you listen to him and it's his voice. It's a feeling of kind of nostalgia.
Yes.
when you're hearing his fights, and especially I guess they've got ESPN has the old fights that they show. It's a lot of Bob Sheridan's calls, and I guess he did a lot of calls. I guess international or maybe armed forces call for
Yes, no, both.
Yeah, right. So like the Tyson Douglas, which is I find is a great, fascinating fight. I love that.
Oh my God.
I showed that fight to my son. It's like he became a fight fan, and it was like, well, this is one fight I really want to show you. You hear about Mike Tyson and how great he was, and the legend of Mike Tyson, and I love watching Tyson too myself. In the '80s, and he was fascinating.
Oh, sure.
And stuff like that, but I think he's a little overblown in my estimation. And he's
You know who else I think is a little overrated? I didn't mean to interrupt you if you had more, but Jeremy Schaap, frankly, I loved his father. His father was a brilliant man, and I don't mean to pick on Jeremy because I know he is an accomplished broadcaster. And also maybe some of my feeling was I might have told you this story before when Tyson was going to fight Clifford Etienne, and it was a big Showtime promotion to get subscribers to Showtime. I was working at Sporting News Radio at the time. And you will remember that for a moment, Clifford Etienne pulled out of the fight.
Yes, right.
Everybody thought the fight would be canceled. Forgive me, because honestly, I don't mean to sound like I'm patting myself on the back, but I saw the promotion for what it was. It didn't matter who Mike Tyson was going to fight. This was a Showtime event because it was also paired with a Jay-Z concert to get people to subscribe to Showtime. Mm-hmm. And it was a free TV event. And it was like, no, they spent a lot of money on this thing. And my bosses were not fans of me covering boxing at Sporting News. It's too long of a story to go into. But my program director in particular is like, we've got Jeremy Schaap on the air right now saying this fight is canceled. What do you know in Chicago that Jeremy Schaap doesn't know, being right there and covering the thing? I'm like, I'm a broadcaster. And this is more about Showtime than it is any fighter. I'm like, much like we learned when Foreman was supposed to fight Tommy Morrison the first time, and it ended up being Tommy Morrison was supposed to fight Michael Bent, the guy Union Kane from Rocky V.
Right.
And they were gonna have a real fight. Michael Bent had pulled out. I don't know if it was an injury or whatever, but the great Tim Tomaszek from Wisconsin, one of the whitest and sweetest guys to ever climb in a ring, who was, jeepers creepers. It was like watching somebody step out of the film Fargo and suddenly have a heavyweight fight. Oh, yeah. I mean, and he's a sweet guy from the Dairyland of Wisconsin, and just, a great, really a funny character of a guy. And, they went on with the HBO promotion because it was all about Tommy Morrison. This Showtime thing was all about Mike Tyson. And only the nighttime guy was, because they didn't care what he did on the air. He's like, John, why are you the only person that we've had on the air so far saying that this fight isn't canceled? And I gave that explanation. I'm like, this is a Showtime promotion. I'm like, it's a showcase fight. It doesn't matter who he fights.
Right.
And certainly Etienne managed to, come to terms, and they threw him more money. And then, of course, he kind of took a dive.
Right.
But yeah, and maybe I hold Jeremy a little too responsible.
Yeah, I actually like him. He ended up. I loved his dad, and his dad.
Schaap is one of the greatest sports broadcasters of all time.
Absolutely, and being a Jets fan, of course, he ghost wrote Namath's autobiography, and he did that TV show with Namath. The Joe Namath show. He
absolutely loved it
with Joe Namath.
Yep. I saw it on ESPN Classic.
I wish ESPN would bring it back. I'd love for them to bring that back. But anyways, he posted on Twitter a photograph of his dad on bikes in New York City with a bunch of obscure jet players. And he said, I really need to know who these guys are. And I just was following him. And being the ridiculous, stupid Jets fan I am.
That's great.
Since the 70s, and being obsessed with them, and every single player who's ever played with the Jets, I was able to identify all those guys.
That's great.
You're a player. I answered him, and he was like so thankful, and he ended up following me, and he ended up he's like retweeted stuff that I've done about the Jets and about boxing before. So he's been very nice about that. I've got a real big problem with, I don't want to go off on this tangent too much, but the Cinderella Man, that movie, which he didn't have anything to do with, it's based on his book. So the movie he's not a part of, but that movie, the way they portrayed Max Baer, which I've got, and Steve wrote a fantastic piece in Ringside Seat about Max and Buddy Baer, their lives.
Which is another subject that Steve and I should talk about, because I interviewed Max Jr.
Right, and I told him about that. To get Steve, I said, you need to talk to John about that, because you told me that you had interviewed Max Baer.
It's on the Big Bout podcast feed, actually.
So I hate that. I have never even watched that movie, to be honest with you. I've just heard about it. I've seen clips of it.
It's folklore. It's like William Bendix's Babe Ruth story.
Yeah, and it's the way they portrayed Max Baer is just like
it's really a sad insult to Baer's memory.
Absolutely,
and I mean truly.
You told me you talked to his son about that.
Yep, and also, I talked to Angelo Dundee about that as well. I was incredibly flattered by that production, because one of the producers reached out to me because they saw I had done an audio documentary of the second Dempsey-Tunney fight, the Soldier Field fight, the long count. And they're like, you seem to know a lot about boxing history. We're prepping a movie about, Cinderella Man and Jim Braddock, and Ron Howard's going to direct it. I'm like, wow. And they're like, we're kind of narrowing a list. And I called Bert Sugar all excited. And I'm like, hey, man, I got this amazing call. He's like, all right, first of all, relax. They called me too. And I'm like, certainly going to lose to you. He goes, don't feel bad, John. We're both going to lose to Angelo Dundee. He's probably going to get the gig. And I laughed, and he, of course, did get the gig. Not only being in the movie, but was one of the fight experts and stuff, as far as fight consultants, historical consultants. But Hank Kaplan, Angelo, so many of the great old boxing historians were all griping about, like, how dare you besmirch Max Baer Sr., who truly was haunted by two men in the ring.
Yeah, it was terrible what it did to his life, and he was not that type of person.
Right.
Yes. He was, and Muhammad Ali was very influenced by Max Baer and the showmanship that Baer had. I mean, I know that, Gorgeous George was also somebody who was very
both counts, yes.
But so was Max Baer.
Absolutely. No, you're right about that. It's really unfair, and because a lot of people do take films as documentaries rather than being artistic license.
And there are a lot more people of this generation who that's how they're going to think of Max Baer. Oh, Max Baer. And there's a lot of people I see who say, oh, one of the best boxing movies ever is Cinderella Man.
Well, and it is from
boxing movies are all exaggerated. I mean,
right.
They're all, Raging Bull is got that sense of theater and dramatics and exaggeration. I mean, even Scorsese admitted it.
What'd you think of Wepner's movie that Lee Schreiber did?
Well, I liked it, and our copy editor Catherine Mahid, who works for the Film Noir Foundation, also she reviewed both movies. There's two movies on Wepner: The Brawler and Chuck. So in the new,
I haven't seen The Brawler.
Yeah, so in the new, you can read about it in the new issue of Ringside Seat because she reviews both of them. I did not see The Brawler, but I saw Chuck and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I did too. I also liked the 30 for 30 that they did with Wepner as well.
The 30, she talks about that too in her piece. The 30 for 30 was definitely very good.
No, I really want to see them. And now that you say that, I think I saw trailers for The Brawler, like on YouTube or whatever. But no, I never saw it. Boy, I'm gonna have to hunt that down. That'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna break this up from an audio standpoint and all this stuff. I think we'll have a new episode of Ringside Seat, or pardon me, Big Bout podcast.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
But I think this, and I'm glad we're kind of going off on these tangents. But I also, it's 11:40 your time. Are you want to wrap up? Whatever you want to do.
I might need to let my dogs out.
That's lovely. Who's that band again? Who let the dogs out?
Right. Exactly.
I forget what they were called. That's fantastic. No, dude, we can wrap up. Absolutely, man. No, Mike, this is great. And again, I apologize for the marathon, but I know you had
No,
fun. And
I'm happy. I mean, if my dogs could hold it longer,
poor thing's probably shivering in the corner. Can we go now, please? Are you done?
Right, exactly.
No, this is great, Mike, honestly. And as we said off the air, and I won't even ask you to. I'll email you the stuff I wanted to tell you about.
Let's talk a little bit off the air.
Okay, all right. If the dogs can handle it, that's fine.
Yeah, we can talk for another 10 minutes, 15 minutes.
Okay, buddy, that's fine. Well, we'll wrap it here, and I'll thank you for doing this, and thanks everybody for hanging out. Great questions. I'm sorry I didn't get to everything. Eric Williams, is Bernstein still doing Showtime boxing? Yes, he is.
Yes.
So Al's a Chicago guy. Whoops.
Oops.
There you go.
If there's any other stuff, if you want to go ahead and go through stuff. There's it.
Well, Steve mentioned that The Harder They Fall is a great Bogart Noir boxing film. It absolutely is.
The Harder They Fall. Steve wrote an article in the last issue of Ringside Seat all about The Harder They Fall. It's really excellent, and he read the book and he talks about the book also. And
I got to interview Bud Schulberg firsthand and talk about Harder They Fall, and that was one of the great joys of my boxing career, and then also again an episode of Big Bout Podcast. Everyone who's interested in the boxing portion of this, check out the Big Bout Podcast. I might even edit this portion of the video and put that up as a separate Big Bout file as well. So, that's so funny. Mario says great podcast, and I don't even like boxing. Well, that's good. I appreciate it. Oh, that's why, man. Boxing is a really, again, as we said, the criminal element of it, and then the human stories are really fascinating.
And look, as far as sports movies go, the best sports movies are boxing movies.
Absolutely. One-on-one.
Not going to take away how many great football movies are.
And baseball movies.
But there's some excellent baseball movies. But, man, boxing movies, there's a ton of them.
No, the pure drama of it. Absolutely. Well, yeah, we'll get Steve's stuff working better. And do a new talk about some of the stuff that we hit and everything. But everybody, thanks a lot for watching and listening. Great stuff coming from Word Balloon next week as we head towards Mainframe Comic-Con next weekend. That's going to be a big deal. I'll talk more about it on the videos and audios. But as always, as I end every broadcast,